Chapter 927. Boom! An ancient seal fell from the sky. It glowed brilliantly, and endless Taoist rhymes flowed in the seal, trying to suppress the blue sky. However, the seal that seemed to contain vast, immortal, might instantly collapsed upon coming into contact with the black light, and it transformed into jade light that filled the sky before dissipating. Yishana frowned, but he wasn't surprised. He already knew that the young man in front of him was the young master of the Taigu Ling people. How could he not know that he was a supreme being? In the current Azure world, supreme beings almost never appeared. The most powerful beings in the various clans were only ninth-stage saints or half-step supreme beings. However, only the top ancient clans with a long history knew that the ones who really determined the upper limit of a force were the supreme beings who were in seclusion all year round. Some were even buried in their tombs. Without immortality, great emperors were already the peak of the mortal world. However, even though the foliaceae had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, there were no great emperors in the clan. As for whether there were great emperors among the Ling people, Yishana guessed that there were. After all, it was impossible for a heavenly supreme to make the realm lord afraid. There might even be more than one great emperor among the Ling people. Buzz! Just as Ishanha put his hands behind his back and waited for the supreme being of the Ling people to appear, another black light lit up in the sky. Yishana's expression changed. Just as he was about to use his divine power, he saw a sudden surge of immortal light in the depths of the divine mountain. Fellow cultivator, please stop. A long sigh sounded from the depths of the ancestral land of the foliaceae. It was ethereal and melodious, like the chanting of an immortal god. The world buzzed, and the mountains and rivers trembled. Everyone felt that their minds were collapsing. When they looked up again, they saw a glowing palm coming from afar. It instantly crushed the black light and disappeared without a trace. Finally, he's out. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. He was also a little shocked. Compared to the supreme beings he had seen before, the jade-white palm seemed to contain the true power of the heavenly path. Even the aura emitted from it was enough to shatter the sky and destroy the sun and moon. This was the power of a supreme godhead. He was also the true peak existence in this world. In the face of such power, not to mention Ling Xiao, even Gui Ying would not have the slightest ability to resist. A heavenly supreme. Previously, when he had killed the saint realm expert of the foliaceae, he had already learned from his soul consciousness that there was a heavenly sovereign among the patriarchs of the foliaceae. His lifespan could be traced back to the war of the immortals and demons. It was extremely long. However, this ancestor of the foliaceae didn't easily appear in the world. Even the saint realm of the foliaceae had never seen his true appearance. He did not expect that today he would actually take the initiative to make a move and block Spirit Shadow's second attack. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the sky. All of a sudden, a crack appeared in the void. Following that, a ghostly figure slowly walked out and descended from the sky, landing in front of Ling Xiao. Then, in the depths of the ancestral land of the foliaceae, a blinding brilliance suddenly bloomed. In a short moment, it was so bright that it blotted out the sky and blocked everyone's vision. Greetings, Patriarch. Immediately, a series of greetings came from the sacred mountain. Ling Zhao's eyes turned cold as he looked at the place where the immortal light had fallen. He saw a skinny old man in white appear out of thin air, standing above everyone's heads. He looked extremely old, and even his body was covered with a layer of white aura. However, just by standing there, he made the world submit to him. He was calm and suppressed the mortal world, deliberately mystifying things. However, at this moment, a murderous look suddenly appeared on Spirit Shadow's face. His figure suddenly disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already about 10 feet in front of Yishanha. In an instant, a black light shone from his hand. With an aura that could destroy eternity and endless murderous Tao, it hit Yishanha's heart. Heaven and earth turned dark, and the universe was reversed. Even Yishanha could not react in time. He could only watch as the black light pierced through his body, killing him along with the experts of the Yi clan behind him. Yi Shana looked at the black-robed figure in front of him in a daze. His lips trembled, and he did not know what to say. When the ancestor appeared just now, he thought that today's farce had come to an end, so he relaxed. He never thought that the supreme martial artist of the Ling clan would dare to sneak an attack on him in front of the ancestor. All his regret was meaningless now. All that was left was desolation and unwillingness. Who would have thought that the dignified master of the Foliaceae, a ninth-grade Saint Stage powerhouse, would end up like this because of a branch family member? Seeing this scene, Ling Zhao's expression remained calm. When the patriarch of the Foliaceae appeared, he did not dare to kill Spirit Shadow. It was likely that today, peace was most likely the most important thing. However, what Ling Zhao wanted was not the attitude of the Foliaceae. What he wanted was to eliminate the hidden dangers of the Shengzhou and pave a path of invincibility for the future. Therefore, Yi Shana had to die. Only then would this storm be irreversible. And if a heavenly supreme attacked in anger, the entire Azure world would probably be shaken, right? Shana. In the void above, the patriarch of the Foliaceae was furious. His voice was filled with killing intent, and for no reason, it instantly froze the world. Everyone only felt a chill rise from the soles of their feet. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and there was a fear of eternal damnation. Ling people, you've gone too far. The patriarch of the Foliaceae took a deep breath. Wherever his gaze landed, the void would shatter. It was as if the primordial immortal light had pierced through the ancient times, and the sun, moon, and stars fell majestically. In the next moment, a dense jade light surrounded his body, forming a universe of its own. It directly imprisoned Spirit Shadow and Ling Zhao's figures on the spot, unable to move at all. At this moment, the patriarch of the Foliaceae hesitated. His gaze moved between Spirit Shadow and Ling Zhao for a moment, and finally landed on the former. You killed my clan leader and elder. Even if you're Ling people's person, you'll be reincarnated today. After saying that, the patriarch of the Foliaceae finally stopped hesitating. He pressed his palm down, and there seemed to be billions of Tao patterns flickering in and out of his palm. Vast supreme divine power poured down from the sky like a heavenly river bursting its banks and a divine mountain falling from the west. The entire heavenly wood region suddenly trembled at this moment, as if it could not withstand the anger of a heavenly supreme and was about to collapse. However, surprisingly, there was no trace of fear on Spirit Shadow's face. Even Ling Zhao's eyes did not have the slightest trace of fear. Only Yi Qingru looked at the cold Yi Shanha in front of her in a daze. She was dazed, and there was no longer any arrogance in her. She could not understand how today's matter had developed to such a stage. Her father, the famous patriarch of the Foliaceae in the Azure world, how could he be killed in the ancestral land of the Foliaceae without any warning? In the end, the reason why Yi Qingshan had come to the lower world back then was not because of her outstanding talent that could suppress this branch family member. In fact, in the eyes of the patriarchs, there was not much difference between a direct descendant and a branch family. During the Great War of the Immortals and Demons, all 18 patriarchs of the Foliaceae had died in battle. The so-called direct descendant now was just Yi Luoyun's lineage. However, 100,000 years ago, every branch of the Foliaceae had a patriarch overseeing it. How could there be a difference between direct and branch family members? Yi Qingru was the young patriarch of the Foliaceae because she had a ninth-stage Sage Realm father. However, Yi Qingshan did not. But now, everything seemed to have changed. Yi Qingshan returned from the Shengzhou, and the people standing behind her were the Taigu Ling people. How could this be? Why? Chapter 928. Boom, boom. Endless divine light fell from the sky, and tribulation thunder rumbled. It was a divine punishment. At this moment, whether it was the spectators outside, the heavenly wood territory, or the countless disciples of the Foliaceae on the sacred mountain, their eyes were filled with intense shock and fear. The might of a heavenly sovereign had not appeared in the Azure world for thousands of years. Who would have thought that someone would provoke the patriarch of the Foliaceae today and incur the wrath of the Foliaceae patriarch? Although the patriarch of the Foliaceae patriarch was at the end of his lifespan, his cultivation had regressed instead of advancing, and he had already fallen to the category of a second-grade heavenly sovereign. However, with the exception of the patriarchs of the ancient clans and celestial sects who had not appeared for a long time, there were not many people who could withstand such a supreme power. However, even when the divine seal fell, Ling Xiao and the patriarch's expressions did not change much. Although the patriarch of the Foliaceae patriarch had imprisoned their bodies, Ling Xiao still had a substitute puppet in his hands. Moreover, he now had 3 bodies. Although he was not truly immortal, he would not die so easily. He was waiting for the Ling people to give him an attitude. Buzz! At a certain moment, a wisp of biting cold quietly came from the void in the distance. The originally angry patriarch of the Foliaceae patriarch's expression suddenly turned cold. Then, he looked up at the vast expanse of the sky with fear in his eyes. Layers of ripples suddenly appeared in the blue sky. A wisp of clear light fell from the sky, as if the world had just been created. The light of creation from the beginning of the primordial chaos instantly destroyed the ancient seal. Then, with an unstoppable momentum, it pierced through the patriarch of the Foliaceae patriarch. How can this be? The patriarch of the Foliaceae patriarch's expression changed drastically. His voice was filled with unconcealed fear, as if he had seen something unbelievable. At this moment, he could feel a wisp of aura firmly locking onto him from thousands of miles away. He could not dodge this wisp of clear light. But who exactly was it that could suppress a heavenly sovereign like him with just a wisp of aura? Have the Taigu Ling people really become so powerful? No, I don't believe it. The ancestor of the Foliaceae raised his head and roared. The supreme divine might around his body surged. Boundless divine radiance shot into the sky and dazzled. 7-colored immortal radiance stretched out for a myriad of kilometers, and they formed layer upon layer of phenomena that shook the heavens. This commotion caused the entire azure sky world to be completely shaken. Countless auras woke up from their slumber and looked in the direction of the Foliaceae. Their eyes were filled with indescribable shock. A battle between heavenly sovereigns had not occurred in the azure firmament world for tens of thousands of years. After all, at such a realm, wanting to decide life and death was simply not something that could be done in a short period of time. A casual attack from the 2 heavenly sovereigns was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. It could easily slaughter billions of lives and crush countless realms. Therefore, ever since the Realm Lord took control of the Azure Sky Realm, he had issued a decree forbidding heavenly sovereigns from attacking. Those who disobeyed the decree would be killed. Who would have thought that such a great battle would erupt in the Azure Sky world today? Furthermore, although the divine radiance above the heavenlywood region was vast and boundless, it was mixed with an unconcealable sadness. How ridiculous was that? In today's mortal world, if the Dharch did not appear, the heavenly sovereigns were already supreme and almost immortal. Who was it that could force a heavenly sovereign to walk the path of a stranger? Buzz! In the sky above the Foliaceae's ancestral land, that ray of clear light leisurely descended. However, under the cover of the light outside the Foliaceae's body, this ray of light was really weak and pitiful. However, even with the layers of immortal radiance and surging waves, it could not affect it at all. No! 100 Taishian Jade Sutra, Immortal Jade, Divine Seal. The Foliaceae's patriarch's eyes were filled with despair. The jade light outside his body had already solidified and was like a crystal armor that covered his body. The awakening of a heavenly sovereign's aura shocked billions of people in the myriad realms. He stretched out his palm, and an ancient seal extended. In an instant, it had already expanded to 1,000 feet in size and released endless divine radiance. It was as if the sky was crashing down and suppressing that clear light. Clearly, This heavenly sovereign of the Foliaceae had already used his most powerful technique. Boom! Boom! The entire Foliaceae's ancestral land suddenly collapsed. Ghostly figures rushed out and protected Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan behind them. In the depths of the ancestral land, several powerful and ancient auras also stepped out. Each of them used their own techniques to block that terrifying spirit radiance above the void. Even so, there were still countless young disciples with low cultivation levels in the crowd, bleeding from their 7 orifices and falling to the ground dead. However, what was terrifying was that the moment the immortal Tao ancient seal came into contact with the clear light, it instantly dissipated and dissipated. Impossible! Impossible! The Foliaceae's patriarch's face was filled with horror, and his eyes were filled with the desire to die. However, his body seemed to be imprisoned by heaven and earth, and he could not move at all. He could only watch as the clear light streaked across and pierced through his forehead, then floated above the void. The divine radiance disappeared, and the divine radiance dissipated. Heaven and earth were silent, and only that wisp of clear light was left. Ling Xiao's eyes were calm as he looked up at the source of the clear light, only to see an ancient bronze token slowly appear. There was only one word on it: Ling drip, drip. A drop of the sovereign's blood fell from the Foliaceae's patriarch's forehead, and it contained the terrifying power of the Avicania realm. Ling Xiao's eyes trembled, and the power of the realm descended, keeping ghostly shadow and Yi Qingchuan into the realm. After a long while, the 3 of them reappeared in heaven and earth. Only then did they see with trembling eyes that the originally towering divine mountain had already become a pile of ruins. Above the void, several Foliaceae's powerhouses had sorrowful expressions, and their auras were weak. It was as if they had been severely injured by that drop of sovereign's blood. I'll fight it out with you. When they saw Ling Xiao, a Foliaceae's patriarch's face immediately showed a look of hatred. However, just as he rushed out and was about to rush towards Ling Xiao, thousands of ripples appeared in the void in the distance again. One after another, ancient and powerful auras appeared from the void, and strange phenomena rose around them, intimidating heaven and earth. It was actually 3 earthly supremes and 6 powerhouses at the peak of the saint stage. Behind the 9 of them, there were thousands of figures in heavy armor and holding halberds following behind them. Each of them had an aura above the venerable stage. Vast and mighty, they covered the clouds and the sun, and there was a kind of aura that could kill heaven and earth rippling in the void. The 9 elders of the Ling people lead 3,000 black demon guards to welcome the young master back to the clan. Welcome the young master back to the clan. A murderous aura smashed down with a loud bang. The blue sky was dark, and the sun was dim. Even Ling Xiao's eyes flashed with a strange light. The Foliaceae's patriarchs and powerhouses, who were originally unwilling, suddenly turned pale. The Black Demon Guards are the iron-blooded troops of the Taigu Ling people to suppress the rebels. It was said that the hands of these 3,000 people were stained with the blood of billions of dead souls. They were fearless and decisive in killing. When the Black Demon Guards appeared, heaven and earth would have no longevity, and all living beings would cry together. As for the 9 elders of the Ling people, their cultivation was even more supreme. Just this force alone was enough to easily destroy thousands of star regions and ancient sections. Plop! In the crowd, Yi Qingrou's legs suddenly went weak, and she collapsed to the ground. Her beautiful face was pale and lifeless, and there was nothing else. Chapter 929. Ling Xiao clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the 9 Ling people elders and 3,000 demon guards above him. His gaze remained calm. He knew that the Taigu Ling people were powerful and mysterious, and that they were the true hidden giants of the Azure Sky world. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the power of this faction. It was obvious that the Ling people's ancient token was not sent by the 9 people in front of him, but by someone else. To be able to kill a heavenly sovereign from hundreds of millions of miles away, he wondered how powerful this person was. But no matter what, the stronger the Ling people were, the more useful they would be to Ling Xiao. Unparalleled honor. Today's matter would soon spread throughout the Azure Sky world, and Master Ling Xiao's name would become a taboo in all the ancient sects, immortal clans, and immortal dynasties. The death of a heavenly sovereign had not been seen in the Azure Sky world for tens of thousands of years. But today, with the birth of the young master of the Ling people, the only heavenly sovereign of the Foliae, a vassal of the immortal clans, and an alliance of the Realm Lord's palace, had fallen. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the old figure that was still standing in the void, but there was no longer any trace of life around him. His eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of evil. A drop of a sovereign's blood could crush several earthly sovereigns. If he could keep this corpse and refine it into a puppet, it might become another trump card in Ling Xiao's hands. Is there anyone in the Foliae who is against suppressing Yi Qingru in the lower realm? Ling Xiao's gaze swept across the group of Foliae powerhouses, and his tone was extremely calm. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed, but no one dared to object. In fact, at this moment, many Foliae powerhouses looked at Yi Qingru with a hint of hatred in their eyes. If not for her, the Foliae would not have suffered such a calamity. Yi Shana's death was equivalent to the end of the Foliace's inheritance. The fall of the patriarch of the Foliae was the end of the ancient clan. Without their protection, who would protect the vast heavenly wood territory with just the 3 earthly sovereigns in the Foliae? Moreover, the Foliae were here to guard the Shenzhou continent. But once the Foliae were destroyed, who would guard the peace of the 9 heavens? Good. Since there are no objections, Yi Qingru will be suppressed in the lower realm. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, and he looked at the young woman that lay limply on the ground and seemed to have lost her soul. I'm a person that values justice the most. Since you framed Miss Qingchan for 300 years in the lower dimensions, then I'll punish you with 300 years. 300 years later, you can return to the Azure continent. Young master is righteous. The members of the Foliae clenched their teeth, and in the end, they all shouted in unison, causing Yi Qingru to bleed from the corner of her mouth and faint on the spot. But this matter has been settled. Gentlemen of the Foliae, shouldn't we talk about another matter? With the Ling people's methods, it was impossible for them not to have set up a trap to control the Shenzhou continent. Therefore, Ling Xiao did not have to worry about the secret of the Shenzhou continent being exposed. Hearing Ling Xiao's words, the earthly sovereigns of the Foliae were stunned. One of them, an old man with white hair and a white beard, stepped forward and said humbly, "What is the matter, young master?" One could imagine the fear in the hearts of these earthly sovereigns. Today, the Black Demon Guards had appeared. If the Foliae did not want to be destroyed, they had to suppress the hatred in their hearts and plan for another day. Especially now that the Realm Master had disappeared, there was no force in the entire Azure world that could compete with the Ling people. However, the tyranny of this clan was evident today. Since ancient times, forces that were too tyrannical would either ascend to the 9 heavens or be destroyed. This chaotic world was slowly unfolding. This time, who would be the one to stand above the heavens and earth? The Foliae bullied me. If they don't pay the price, it will be difficult to appease the hatred in my heart. Ling Xiao's tone was indifferent, but his words caused the expressions of countless Foliae powerhouses to change. The Foliae bullied you? You. Our Foliae patriarchs were all killed, and you say that our Foliae bullied you? You, 3rd elder. The white-haired old man at the front shook his head slightly, his expression calm. At this point, the Foliae had no room for negotiation. With the strength of the 9 Ling people's elders, it would only take a moment for them to kill all of them. Young Master Ling, our clan has an immortal treasure that belongs to the celestial race. Today we offer it to you to congratulate you on your rebirth. What? The Foliae powerhouses clenched their fists. No matter how unwilling they were, they didn't dare to show it at all. Everyone in the Azure world knew about this immortal treasure, and Ling Zhao's words just now were most likely for this treasure. Oh, immortal treasure? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. May I know how to address this senior? Foliace Yi Yan. The white-haired old man bowed and said in a humble tone, this person was the Foliace patriarch who brought Yi Qingchuan to the Foliace's ancestral land. He was also the strongest Foliace powerhouse now. So it's Senior Yi Yan. Since Senior has spoken, then Ling Xiao will reluctantly accept. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. When he saw Yi Qingchuan frowning and hesitating, he said softly, since the Foliace storm is over, I will return to the Ling people first. I hope Miss Qingchuan will personally give that immortal treasure to the Ling people. Miss Qingchuan and I hit it off at first sight. Keep this divine talisman well. If anyone dares to bully you in the future, I will not spare them. With that, Ling Xiao stepped forward and stood in front of the 9 elders. Greetings, young master. Let's go. Ling Xiao turned his head and took a deep look at Yi Qingchuan. Then, he lifted his foot and flew into the distance. When everyone was far away, the remaining Foliace patriarchs said hatefully, Yi Yan, what do you mean by this? Ling people kill my patriarch. Clan leader, you actually want to give him an immortal treasure? Not only do I want to give him an immortal treasure, Patriarch Yi Yan's eyes were calm as he turned to look at Yi Qingchuan. I also want to make Qingchuan the young master of the Foliace. What? The expressions of the Foliace patriarchs changed drastically. However, they seemed to have thought of something in the blink of an eye. You mean, what happened today was caused by Yi Shana's stubbornness and self-righteousness. The Foliace has no protection now. Chaotic times have arrived. Our Foliace bears the name of a vassal of the immortal race. It is inevitable that other forces will be jealous and hate us. If the Realm Lord was still here, it would not matter. But now, Yi Yan sighed softly and looked up at the golden pillar in the distant sky. With Qingchuan's relationship with the young master of the Ling people, perhaps this is the only opportunity for our Foliace. But the clan's feud is irreconcilable. However, our Foliace needs to ensure that our inheritance continues before we can see the light of day again. This passed down my clan's order. Send Yi Qingru to the Shengzhou continent. She is not to be summoned and is not to return to the clan. I think that even if Patriarch Luo Yun knows about what happened today, he will understand my good intentions. Finally, Yi Yan looked coldly at the crowd. He waved his hand and led Yi Qingchuan into the depths of the ancestral land. Now, there were no more patriarchs in the Foliace. Yi Yan was the strongest in terms of cultivation. As a 7th grade earthly sovereign, he was responsible for the rise and fall of the clan. Even if some people were angry, they did not dare to cause trouble at this juncture. The storm came to an end. Chapter 9:30. Dark clouds covered the sky for thousands of miles. Ling Xiao stood in front of the crowd with his hands behind his back. His robes fluttered in the wind, making him look otherworldly and unrestrained. Beside him, the 9 elders of the Ling people looked at him with admiration. After planning for tens of thousands of years, this young master did not disappoint. That ancestor Yi Yan is one of the Ling people, right? Ling Xiao suddenly turned his head and looked at a stooped old man with an obvious scar on his face. He smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry." At this moment, he did not know what methods the Ling people had used to make an ancestor of the Foliace willing to be their spy. However, it was obvious that this plan was not planned for hundreds of years. Young master is wise. The old man was called Ling Tu, and he was the first elder of the Taigu Ling people. He was an 8th grade Earth sovereign and was almost invincible below the heavenly sovereign level. So, before I came to the upper world, today's Foliace crisis was already destined? Ling Xiao nodded gently. From the beginning, he did not believe that the Ling people would allow the Foliace to continue controlling the Shengzhou. Even if no one knew his identity as the Sky Demon, his background would still be a problem. Coming from the Shengzhou, there would be some flaws. The Realm Lord was missing, and he had already seen the secret of the immortal demon Ancient Bell in the soul of the Foliace half-saint. However, He did not know if the Ling people were behind all these bizarre events. If not, then what was with the 8 bells? That's right. Even if young master did not take the initiative to start a fight today, Yin would have done so. However, in this way, it would not only be the ancestor of the Foliaceae and Yi Shanhe who would die. Ling Tu's calm words allowed Ling Xiao to understand the ancient clan more thoroughly. If he did not provoke the Foliaceae today, Yin would have been an abandoned pawn, and the Foliaceae would have completely disappeared from the Azure world. With 2 hands prepared, nothing could go wrong. Who killed the patriarch of the Foliaceae just now? Ling Xiao looked into the distance and saw that in the depths of the sea of clouds, there was a divine pillar that towered into the sky. Above it, there seemed to be a divine palace hidden in the clouds, grand and majestic. That was the main hall of the Azure Firmament world. It was also the true divine palace in the eyes of billions of beings in the star fields. Ling people were strong because they were secretive and mysterious. If it weren't for the fact that a powerful being from the Ling people had killed a heavenly supreme with a single order today, all the clans and powers in the Azure world would only know that back then, when the Azure world lord had conquered thousands of territories, he had only let the Taigu Ling people go. After that, the Realm Lord Hall appeared out of nowhere, but it still didn't take in the Ling people's territory. It could be seen from this that the Azure Sky World Master was extremely fearful of the Ling people. This was the reason why all the powers had a wisp of fear on their faces when they mentioned the Taigu Ling people in the past 100,000 years. However, the Realm Lord Palace's strength lay in the open. Billions of living beings worshipped him. Wherever the World Divine Guards went, they would either submit or be destroyed. For tens of thousands of years, no one had broken this rule. Even though the Realm Lord had been missing for more than 200 years, no power dared to go against the Realm Lord Palace. They only dared to stir up trouble in private. Young Master, the Clan Master, and the 13th Ancestor are waiting for you in the clan. They will discuss this matter with you in detail. Ling Tu bowed and smiled, not daring to say anything else. All right, Ling Xiao nodded lightly. Without the slightest hesitation, he was escorted by the 9 elders and 3,000 Black Devil Guards towards the northern territory of the Azure continent. Along the way, there were layers of divine mountains and seas of ancient trees. Starfields densely covered the heavens and earth. Among them, there were ancient palaces of large sections. There was an extremely ancient and terrifying aura hidden in the mountains and forests. Looking into the distance, no one dared to make a move. At the Shangzhou Array in the Heavenly Wood region, a group of Foliaceae experts escorted Yi Qingru to the array behind Yi Yin. Go. The defeat of our Foliaceae was caused by your jealousy. This is karma. I hope you know what to do. 4th Ancestor. Yi Qingru's eyes were filled with grief and indignation. Although today's outcome was indeed her own fault, for some reason, Yi Qingru felt that there was a conspiracy behind it. However, with her temperament and experience, how could she compare to the Ling people? Therefore, this feeling only surfaced in her heart without any evidence. The Lord Ling Xiao said that whether you can return to this world after 300 years will depend on your own fortune. Ian placed his hands behind his back and sighed softly. However, there was not a trace of sorrow in his eyes. Yes, in the end, Yi Qingru did not dare to say anything more. She lifted her foot and walked toward the array passage. Boom! The sky was filled with multicolored light, and Yi Qingru's figure finally disappeared before everyone's eyes. Everyone disperse. Ian waved his hand, dismissing everyone. He stood in front of the ancient array and seemed to be deep in thought. Sigh. 4th Ancestor is still loyal. Yes, don't be fooled by the 4th Ancestor's humility in front of the Ling clan. This is all for our sake. Without 4th Ancestor, the Foliaceae would not have survived today. You can't say that. Yi Qingchan is favored by young Masterling. Most likely, she won't die. I'm afraid that you and I sigh. Whether the Foliaceae can regain its glory in the future will depend on whether Miss Qingchan can gain young Master's favor. Actually, 300 years ago, I felt that 4th Ancestor could achieve great things. He is the only ancestor who protects the branch family members. Yes. Anyway, I have decided that I will lick fourth ancestor's boots and be loyal to Miss Ching-chan. The group of Foliaceae experts shook their heads and sighed softly as they discussed in low voices. In the entire Foliaceae, there were only a few hundred experts who truly belonged to Yishana's branch. The remaining thousands of disciples were all branch family members in the eyes of Yishanha and the rest. They were no different from Yi Qingchan. Originally, when the Foliaceae's ancestor was still alive, no one dared to object to this prejudice. After all, the reason why the Foliaceae could establish themselves in Qingsong was because of the protection of this heavenly sovereign. But now, with the death of Yishanha and the ancestor, the so-called division of the branch family had become a long-suppressed resentment in the hearts of everyone. Moreover, Yishanha was obstinate and self-opinionated. He had protected his daughter, which had led to today's disaster. So, it seemed that he really deserved to die. Yi Yin waited until everyone had left before he took out an item from his cosmos bag. It was a black, ancient cauldron, and he casually threw it into the Shengzhou passage. The few of you, guard the array. Kill anyone who comes close. Several figures walked out of the void. They were all members of the Foliaceae and were also Yi Yan's trusted subordinates. The chess pieces of the chess pieces were the essence of the chess game. That's right. The ancient Tao cauldron was bestowed by the Ling people. Now that it was placed in the passage, if there were any changes, the Ling people would definitely sense it. Of course, with the current power of Qingsong, there were very few who could break the cauldron, let alone the Shengzhou region, which was shackled by the heavenly Tao. Yes, the few of them bowed and watched Yi Yin disappear. Boom! Suddenly, a black light shone in the passage, almost shattering time and space. Yi Qingrou's expression changed. When she turned her head again, she saw a black spiritual curtain covering the sky and completely sealing the passage. There is indeed a conspiracy. With Yi Qingrou's temperament, although she couldn't figure out the crux of the matter, it was obvious that someone had deliberately set up this trap and sealed the passage. Although the branch family of the Foliaceae didn't know what was suppressed in Shengzhou, as the young master of the Foliaceae, she was well aware. Yi Qingchan, wait for me. When I find ancestor Luo Yun, I will make you wish you were dead. Chapter 9:31. Boom! Dark clouds suddenly covered the sky above the Shengzhou continent. Heavenly lightning punished the world, and endless demonic light descended. It was like the end of the world. She stood on the divine mountain in a golden robe. She looked up at the figure falling from the sky with a calm gaze. It had only been a few days, but the dragon girl's temperament seemed to have undergone a great change. The shyness on her face had long disappeared. She stood there in harmony with heaven and earth, and the charm of the great Tao was on her alone. In particular, the two golden horns on her forehead emitted a pure golden light. She was sacred and noble, like a god of this region. You're finally here? The guardian of the Shengzhou continent that brother spoke of? She raised her head and looked at the white-robed figure that suddenly fell from the thunderclouds. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. Yi Qingru fell from the sky. Her body was covered in wounds, and her face was extremely pale. Blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. She was in a miserable state. It was obvious that the passage to the Shengzhou continent had not been smooth for her. However, even when she felt the clear and dignified gaze on the divine mountain, Yi Qingru still pretended to be calm. She slowly stood up, and even her temperament became cold and indifferent. Yes, she was exiled by the Foliaceae. However, she was a noble descendant of the Foliaceae. One day, she would return to the Azure continent and let everyone know that she, Yi Qingru, was the one with the fate of the Foliaceae. How could a lower world's Manyu restrict her path to immortality? You must be Yi Qingchan's previous servant. In the end, Yi Qingrou's gaze landed on Shi-Er. Her beautiful eyes flashed with surprise. Originally, when a member of the Foliaceae descended, they would be given the divine blood ancient token to resist the seal of this world. However, this time, she was chased down by someone, so she did not bring the token with her. Under the shackles of the Shenzhou continent, her cultivation level was suppressed to the 9th stage divine emperor level. However, even so, Yi Qingru knew that there was a faction in the Shenzhou continent that was founded by the first member of the Foliaceae to descend. It had been loyal to the Foliaceae for generations. But why didn't this young girl have a trace of respect on her face? Instead, there was a faint killing intent. Also, what was with the aura on her body? Why did it make people feel unconsciously terrified? Are you the new guardian of the Foliaceae? She stretched out her jade-like hand and slowly raised it. The thunderclouds in the sky dissipated in an instant, and the bright sun hung high in the sky. Yi Qingru was stunned. Her eyes flashed with a trace of fear. This girl could control the heavenly Tao of this world. How could this be? Who are you? Where's our ancestor Yi Luoyun? At this moment, Yi Qingru suddenly had an epiphany. She felt that she had fallen into a very deep trap. Whether it was the things that happened in the Foliaceae or the predicament she was facing now, it seemed like they were all arranged and carefully designed by someone in advance. Cold sweat flowed down Yi Qingru's cheeks. She felt an indescribable sense of death. Yi Luoyun is dead. The corner of Shi'er's mouth suddenly raised into a pure and bright smile. Then, she suddenly clenched her jade-like hand. The power of heaven and earth gathered in the void, forming a 1,000-foot-long divine vortex that crushed toward Yi Qingru. No, you can't kill me. I have a soul tablet in the upper world. If you kill me, the Foliaceae will not let you go. At this moment, Yi Qingru's heart and soul were shattered, but she was powerless to resist. In the Shenzhou world, Shi'er was the heavenly Tao. How could a descendant of the Foliaceae with no fate and a shattered Tao heart contend against her? Poof! In a breath, Yi Qingru's physical body shattered. Even her soul was completely crushed by the divine power of heaven and earth, completely destroyed. In the void far away, Ling Tianlin, dressed in white, stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were calm. He looked at the blooming blood mist in the sky. In the end, he turned around and disappeared without a word. In the Shenzhou continent, thousands of creatures knelt on the ground and sincerely prayed. The scene of Yi Qingru's arrival was like the descent of an evil demon. But the goddess was unparalleled. She destroyed the demon with one hand and should be praised by the world. Brother, wait for me. When I complete the heavenly Tao of this world and absorb it into my soul sea, I will go to the upper world to find you. The smile on Shi'er's face was clear and beautiful. Her eyes seemed to be filled with longing. The dragon soul entered her body and awakened her ancestral dragon true meridians. It also made her bear the burden of rebuilding the order of this world. Otherwise, why would she hesitate and be willing to stay in this corner of the Shenzhou continent? After all, her heart was already set. It was difficult for her to fall in love again. Neither he nor the heavens wanted to let her down. As for the life tablet Yi Qingru spoke of, she shook her head and smiled. This world was no longer as barren as it was 1,000 years ago. Even if the Foliaceae descended, they would be shackled by heaven and earth. No matter how many come, I will kill them all. Brother, one day, for the sword in your hand, I will cut through all obstacles and kill all immortals and gods. Crack! Ching Tsang, Foliaceae. Ian looked at the broken soul tablet in his hand and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had no doubts about the methods of the Ling people, Yi Luoyun was the ancestor of the Foliaceae after all. He was an ancient powerhouse who had followed the immortal race to conquer the world. Although his cultivation might not be stronger than that of the Ling people, he was still a variable. Once Yi Qingru told him what happened to the Foliaceae, it would be inevitable that there would be a lot of trouble. But now, with Yi Qingru's death, Yin finally let go of all the worries in his heart. It was time to wipe out all the Foliaceae's direct descendants. Qingchan. Following Yan's deep voice, a figure in green slowly walked in from outside the main hall. Greetings, fourth ancestor. Yi Qingchan bowed with a calm expression on her face. Although the Foliaceae were now afraid of the Ling people's power and did not dare to disobey, to Yi Qingqian, this clan was still a threat. It was a pity that her cultivation had fallen and she was no longer as famous as she used to be. Otherwise, she would have helped her master eliminate all the hidden dangers. This great sage Fu Tian is the immortal fortune of the Foliaceae. It slays Buddhas and demons and slays rebels. It bears the sacred power of heaven and earth and the appearance of the immortal race. It is one of the 10 sacred swords of the Azure. Without this sword, the Foliaceae would have been destroyed long ago. Now, you have to personally deliver it to the Ling people and hand it to Lord Ling Xiao. With that, Yi Yan handed a white jade square box to Yi Qingqian and smiled gently. Qingqian, you don't need to worry. Soon, the Foliaceae will be ruled by you. Now that the clan leader has just died, the direct descendants are still upset. In a few days, I will announce to the Heavenly Wood region that you are the new master of the Foliaceae. Thank you, fourth ancestor. Yi Qingqian's eyes trembled slightly, but she did not say anything else. She carried the sword box on her back and turned to leave. Only when her figure was far away did Yi Yan's face flash with a profound look. I wonder if I made the right choice this time. 300,000 years ago, the Foliaceae submitted to the immortal race and obtained the rest of their power, achieving unparalleled prestige. However, after the 18 ancestors of the Foliaceae died and the immortal race unified the 9 heavens, this prestige became the restraint of the Foliaceae. As a result, today, the Foliaceae had no relatives and were full of hatred. In the end, the vassal of the immortal race became an insurmountable gap between the ancient race and the human race. Fortunately, Yi Yan had a premonition and left a way out. In this way, as long as the Ling people rose, the Foliaceae would regain its glory and achieve eternal glory. No matter how bad it was, they would not betray their clan for glory. Unfortunately, even though Yi Yan was far-sighted and scheming, he did not expect that the Foliaceae would submit to demons instead of humans. Chapter 9:32. In just a day, what happened in the heavenly would Foliaceae spread to thousands of galaxies. Everyone knew that the young master of the Taigu Ling people had appeared and had a conflict with Yi Qingru, the daughter of the leader of the Foliaceae. Then, the leader of the Foliaceae, Yi Shanhe, and the only heavenly supreme patriarch of the Foliaceae died together. No one knew the details. They only knew that the Ling people who killed the heavenly supreme of the Foliaceae did not even show up. They only threw an ancient token and killed him. This news was like a spark that set the prairie ablaze, swiftly sweeping through the entire azure sky world. Because of this, the fear of the Ling people became even stronger. In today's world, heavenly supremes were already the limit of the mortal world. To be able to kill a heavenly supreme with a wave of his hand, he had to be a great emperor. It seemed that the Taigu Ling people had indeed hidden their strength well. But at the same time, everyone was curious and in awe of the young master of the Ling people who had suddenly appeared. He had appeared and sacrificed the soul of a heavenly supreme. What kind of heavenly might was this? Or was this the beginning of chaos? One had to know that when the Azure Sky World Master established order, heavenly supremes were not allowed to attack. This iron law had been in place for 100,000 years. But now, with the death of the patriarch of the Foliaceae, a new chapter of the Azure Sky world had begun. Countless powerful and ancient auras awakened in the ancestral lands of various races. A new round of war had finally started in the 9 heavens under the rule of the celestial race. It was just that no one knew if the main characters of this world were celestials, humans, or demons. Young Master, it's confirmed. The young master of the Ling people is called Ling Xiao. He suddenly appeared today and descended in the Foliaceae's heavenly wood region. In front of the Realm Master's palace, the white-robed figure with his hair tied up stood quietly and looked down at the changes in the Azure Sky world. He wore a purple gold crown on his head, which added a bit of grace and dominance. But this young master of the Realm Lord Palace was really delicate and pretty. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted and her face was a little sickly pale, causing people to feel pity for her. Shui, it was said that this young master of the World Lord Palace was born from the heavens and earth, not in the six paths, not in the five elements. His talent was heaven-defying. He was the most monstrous person in the azure sky world. No one knew whether this rumor was true or false. But 200 years ago, when the Realm Master went missing, Shui used his own strength to control the immortal devil Ancient Bell, the most precious treasure of heaven and earth. He also personally led the World Divine Guards to suppress the restless foreign races at the edge of the azure sky world, causing his reputation to soar. However, after that, this young lord of the Realm Lord Palace disappeared from the sight of everyone and never appeared again. The immortal devil bell rang 9 times today, and it just so happened that the Ling people's young master was born. Elder Xing, do you think there is a connection between the two? Shui turned to look at the elder beside him, his tone serious. Young lord, the World Divine Guards we sent to the Mabe region have already sent back news. It is true that the traces of a demon have been revealed and slaughtered an entire city of living beings. There are still remnants of demon energy left. The Taigu Ling people and the Xianyuan Imperial clan have always been close. Even if they wanted to confuse the public, they shouldn't have chosen this clan. You have to know, once this matter is investigated by the Xianyuan clan, the Taigu Ling people would be equivalent to cutting off one of their own arms. Elder Xing frowned for a moment, then shook his head. The Mabe region was destroyed by the Ocean Viewing City. This ancient city is the foundation of the Xianyuan clan. 100,000 living beings, several Saint Realm experts, and 2 Supreme Realm experts have all died. If the Ling people only wanted to hide the identity of this young master, why would they make such a big commotion? At the very least, wouldn't it be killing 2 birds with 1 stone by choosing an opposing force? No, Elder Xing, you are wrong. Shui bright eyes were deep. There seemed to be stars blooming in them. It is because the commotion is too big that it seems deliberate. Deliberate? Elder Xing frowned, clearly not understanding the deeper meaning of the young master's words. That's right, deliberate. The warning for the immortal devil Ancient Bell was most likely because it sensed the aura of the sky demon. However, his aura seemed to be quickly covered by something. So, the immortal devil Ancient Bell only rang 9 times before it stopped. However, to be able to destroy Ocean Viewing City, it must be a heavenly supreme or even stronger. Although the sky demon is powerful, how could he have grown to such a level under the eyes of the Realm Lord Palace? Before Shui finished speaking, Elder Xing's face had already turned completely lifeless. Young master, are you suspecting that the Ling people deliberately made such a big commotion to hide the whereabouts of that Ling Xiao? But, young master, if the Ling people were protecting the sky demon, why would they choose to expose themselves at this time? Elder Xing could not understand. Although he had never seen the strength of the Ling people with his own eyes, he had heard the Realm Lord mention it occasionally. This clan had a mysterious origin, but they had a deep foundation. Even the Realm Lord was very wary of them. All this time, Elder Xing had been suspecting that the disappearance of the Realm Lord was most likely related to the Ling people. However, the Realm Lord had already been missing for more than 200 years. If the Ling people wanted to stir up trouble, why would they wait for another 200 years? What exactly were they planning? I can't figure it out either, so I've decided to meet this Ling people's young master. Shui sighed softly and rubbed her eyes as if she was a little tired. With her talent, if she had 1,000 years to grow, she would naturally be able to deal with many hardships. However, the Realm Lord had suddenly disappeared. Before he was ready, he had already shouldered the heavy responsibility of ruling the world. He seemed to be noble, but in reality, every step he took was frightening. Moreover, the people he was facing now were no longer geniuses of the same generation, but those old things who had lived for countless years. Every one of these people was as scheming as demons. If he was not careful, he would be swallowed alive. Fortunately, with the immortal devil Ancient Bell in hand, he had something to rely on to compete with any faction. Young master, you can't. Elder Xing's expression changed as he cried out involuntarily. Others might not know, but he knew the reason why Xue Xiyin had not appeared in the world for more than 200 years. That's right, Xue Xiyin had used the immortal devil Ancient Bell as an emperor god back then. She had been called the next realm lord of the Azure Sky realm by countless factions and experts. The immortal devil Ancient Bell was the most precious treasure of the celestial race, an existence that surpassed divine artifacts. Such a divine item contained extremely terrifying power. Even saints would find it difficult to use its power, let alone emperor gods. However, Xue Xiyin could, and this was the reason why he could so smoothly control the Realm Lord Palace. The Chosen One, however, even if Xue Xiyin's talent was heaven-defying, she still suffered from the backlash of forcefully activating the immortal devil Ancient Bell and was severely injured. As a result, she had been cultivating in seclusion in the Realm Lord Palace for the past 200 years and had not appeared in the world. Even now, Xue Xiyin still suffered from the backlash. As her cultivation increased, this backlash did not disappear, but became even more serious. Old Xing, I know my body well. This backlash cannot be refined in a short period of time. However, it is not enough to take my life. The matter of the heavenly demon is of great importance. We cannot be careless. Xue Xiyin shook her head slightly. Although her face was pale, there was a hint of determination in her heart. Since the Ling people killed the heavenly sovereign of the Foliaceae to welcome the birth of Ling Xiao, I guess they will announce to the Azure Sky that the Ling people's young master is Ling Xiao. This, Elder Xing, prepare a big gift for me. Also, call back the North Desert region's divine guards. They will not be able to find anything. Chapter 9:33. But, young lord, there are no buts. Elder Xing, you don't understand how terrifying the Taigu Ling people are. Although the Xin Yuan clan is the Azure Ling people's family, they might not even be considered an arm in the eyes of the Ling people. Xue Xiyin's expression was cold as he looked at the sky. So, not to mention destroying Guanhai City, even if we uproot this clan, if it benefits the Ling people, they won't hesitate at all. Yes, young lord. Elder Xing's eyes narrowed, but he didn't dare to say anything in the end. He turned around and left. In this young lord, he indeed saw the realm lord's disdain for the world and the grace of controlling everything. This was also the reason why he lowered his status and was willing to assist him. Only when Elder Xing was far away did Xue Xiyin's expression gradually turn cold. He waved his hand lightly, and an ancient golden bell appeared in front of him. There were countless engravings on the bell. Demon birds, great rocks, divine palaces, and majestic mountains. However, these engravings weren't unchanging. Instead, they were constantly changing, as if an era had been reborn. They were indescribably mysterious and profound. Pure light bloomed leisurely, encompassing the universe and the infinite creation, forming a universe of its own. This era belongs to me in the end. Ling people, you've been too careless this time. North of the Azure World, Ling people's territory. This domain was called the Deity Battlefield. It was the ancestral land of the Ling people. Under this deity battlefield, there were still 900 star domains that were dependent on the Ling people. Among them, there were some famous immortal sects and ancient sects in the Azure world that were also dependent on the Ling people. At this moment, black clouds suddenly gathered in the sky above the deity battlefield. The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly resounded. A black-clothed figure stood in the void, looking down at the mountains and rivers below. Beside him, Ling Tu's figure was stooped, and there was a humble and warm look on his old face. Young lord, this is the ancestral land of the Ling people, the deity battlefield. Yes. Ling Xiao nodded slightly, his eyes calm. At this moment, he was able to see that in the depths of the god domain, the heavens and the earth were vast, while 1,000 mountains stood like trees in a forest. Moreover, there was boundless aura of the Tao flowing about and forming the laws of order. Hundreds of millions of Tao patterns fell down like a river of stars. The spiritual aura within was vast. Visible waves of spiritual aura surged out like a tidal wave, emitting bursts of ear-piercing buzzing. Ling Zhao's realm contained 10 dragon veins. However, compared to the spiritual energy in the ancestral land of the Ling people, it was somewhat inferior. The vastness of the upper realm was evident. It was no wonder that the cultivators of the Shengzhou lower world were so desperate to ascend. Just based on the level of spiritual qi, a few years of cultivation would be equivalent to 100 years of cultivation in the lower world. Buzz! Just as Ling Xiao was sighing in his heart, two figures suddenly flew out from the depths of the ancestral land and arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. At the lead was a middle-aged man with a handsome appearance. He had slanted brows, starry eyes, and a handsome appearance. Every single move he made carried a strand of the Tao of nature, and it conformed with the spirit aura of the heavens and the earth. Behind him was a hale and hearty old man with white hair and black robes. At this moment, the two of them were looking at Ling Xiao with smiles on their faces, and their eyes were filled with reverence. Greetings, 13th Ancestor. Greetings, Clan Leader. The 9 great elders and 3,000 black demon guards immediately bowed to the old man. You may all leave. Young master, please follow me. The 13th ancestor of the Ling people, Ling Yuanxing, was the ancestor that the Ling people were most familiar with. Although he looked young, his lifespan had already reached 60,000 years. He was currently the strongest cultivator of the Ling people, a 5th-grade heavenly sovereign. The old man behind him was Ling Zhao's nominal grandfather, the clan leader of the Ling people, Ling Songming. However, what was strange was that the 13th ancestor also addressed Ling Xiao as young master. The three of them walked on air. Along the way, Ling Xiao once again witnessed the terror of the ancient great clan. This territory was hundreds of thousands of miles wide, and it was several times larger than the Shengzhou. However, this was only the ancestral land of the Ling people, not the territory that the Ling people were in charge of. The majestic city was densely packed, and powerful auras rose and fell one after another. There were ancient and terrifying fluctuations of divine power hidden in the dark. Just a wisp of aura seemed to contain the heavenly Tao, and it made people feel terrified. Young master, have you merged with the dragon soul in Shengzhou? Ling Yuanxing turned to look at the young man beside him. Although he was a heavenly sovereign, he did not show any arrogance in front of Ling Xiao. Instead, his attitude was extremely humble. Yes, Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, but there were some doubts in his heart. Judging from the attitude of the Ling people towards him, it was obvious that they saw him as the reincarnation of the Sky Demon. However, since this ancient clan was established by the Sky Demon Palace's powerhouses, how did it escape the eyes of the celestial race and blatantly establish itself in the Azure domain? That's good. This dragon soul is a natural spirit, and it can conceal the Sky Demon aura on your body. As long as you don't actively use the power of the Sky Demon, no one will detect it. Ling Yuanxing smiled indifferently. Please don't blame us, Master. We don't dare to call you Master in front of others. Just treat it as young Master. Otherwise, it will attract a lot of suspicion. I understand. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. He understood. If a group of heavenly sovereigns called him Master in front of others, wouldn't it be directly telling the world that he was the reincarnation of a noble identity? After all, the words Sky Demon were taboo in the 9 heavens. Although the Realm Master was missing, the Realm Master's palace was still the master of the Azure domain, and there were countless powerhouses there. Moreover, this force was a true inheritance of the celestial race, not a vassal of the celestial race like the Foliaceae. Once his identity attracted suspicion, there would be many setbacks. Villains should not be arrogant if they did not want to die. The identity of the young master of the Ling people was enough for him to run amok in this world. Only when he was strong enough to compete with the ancient gods of the celestial race would that be the opportunity for the birth of the Sky Demon. Hiding behind the scenes and uncovering all the secrets of heaven and earth was the correct way to open this path to immortality. The Taigu Ling people were strong, but that was only in the Azure domain. Who knew what kind of grand and magnificent events would occur in this world? When I was in the upper domain, the ancient bell of the Realm Master's palace sounded a warning. How'd you hide it? Please wait a moment, Master. You will know in a while. Ling Yuanqing stopped and looked at the magnificent ancient palace below him. Master, please. When the three figures descended from the sky, there was already a figure waiting in the palace. It was a middle-aged man in black robes. His temperament was ethereal, and his eyes were clear. He held a paper fan in his hand and seemed to have transcended the mortal world. This is a famous expert in the Azure domain, Zhuge Yuntian. He is also the sect leader of the Shinji sect. Of course, what the world doesn't know is that his surname is Ling. He is a member of the Ling people. Ling Yuanqing stood in the palace with his hands behind his back and introduced him to Ling Xiao. Greetings, young master. Zhuge Yuntian's expression was respectful as he put away his fan and bowed. The Shinji sect leader is a fifth-stage sage. He has traveled the Azure domain for tens of thousands of years and has seen the rise and fall of heaven and earth. He knows a lot about the general situation and secrets of this world. I called him here today so that Master can understand the Azure domain as soon as possible. Ling Yuanqing's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. Yuntian, it is Yuntian's honor to be able to sacrifice my life for young Master. Zhuge Yuntian shook his head and smiled. He suddenly dispersed his spiritual aura and said to Ling Xiao, Young Master, please. Ling Xiao frowned slightly. However, when he saw the determined look on Zhuge Yuntian's face, he immediately understood the meaning of the word please. It turned out that this person was only a tool that the Taigu Ling people prepared for Ling Xiao to understand the general situation of the Azure domain. A fifth-stage sage. Although he was not the top of the Azure domain, he was still an elder in an ordinary orthodoxy. However, in the eyes of the Ling people, he was just a sacrifice. Chapter 9:34. Yes, Ling Xiao was indeed talented. He was the Sky Demon's reincarnation. However, he inherited the Sky Demon's physical body and talent, but not the Sky Demon's memories. In other words, he didn't even know what had happened in the Azure world in the past 1,000 years, let alone what had happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. If he hadn't devoured the half-sane of the Foliace's soul, he probably wouldn't even know what the 9 bell tolls meant. The young master of the Ling people should be knowledgeable and knowledgeable. However, he was born in the lower world and didn't know anything about the Azure world. It was obvious that the Ling people had considered this situation. That was why they chose this saint as a sacrifice for him, to search his soul and make up for the thousands or even tens of thousands of years of memories. As expected of an old subordinate of the Sky Demon, their actions were cruel and ruthless, but they were also meticulous enough. Soul light suddenly bloomed in Ling Xiao's eyes and entered Zhuge Yuntian's sea of soul. Given Zhuge Yuntian's level, if he resisted, Ling Xiao would have to spend more effort. However, he opened his sea of soul and sacrificed his life. Therefore, it only took Ling Xiao a few seconds to completely devour the soul of this fifth-level saint. Extremely complicated memories surged in. They included the rise and fall of the Longevity Ancient Clan, the changes of Supreme Orthodoxy, many secrets of the aristocratic families, and legends of the Celestial Dynasty. Divine patterns bloomed in Ling Xiao's eyes, and he disappeared without a trace. I see. At this moment, Ling Xiao already had tens of thousands of years of memories of the Azure world. Moreover, he had a deeper understanding of the Ling people's arrangements. However, sect leader Zhuge didn't know much about the origin of this clan and the true core secrets. The reincarnations of 19 generations of the Ling people. Almost all of the Ling people's direct descendants had heard of the secret. Therefore, after Ling Tianlin's generation, no living beings of the Ling people had been born. Ling Tianlin, as the most talented member of the Ling people, naturally had to shoulder this responsibility. As for why she was the moon of Xianyuan, it was naturally because of the human emperor's sacred blood flowing in her body, as well as the Xianyuan imperial clan's inherited sacred artifact, the boundary-breaking talisman. The Shenzhou continent was originally a cage used by the immortals to seal the remains of the sky demon. However, what truly tempted the Ling people was not the demon bones, but the dragon soul that suppressed the heavenly Tao. This soul could suppress the sky demon's aura. If he could merge it into his body, he would be able to conceal Ling Zhao's identity. Ling people had even found out about Yi Luyun's scheme, which was why the Blood Devil Emperor had descended to the lower realm. In the end, whether it was the Xianyuan clan, the Foliaceae, or even Liang Yi and the others, they were just pawns in the Taigu Ling people's scheme. However, the only thing that puzzled Ling Xiao was how the Ling people knew that this body of his had no memories after reincarnating. Where did the Ling people come from? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at 13th Ancestor Ling beside him. 13th Ancestor Ling clenched his fist and handed an ancient bronze token to Ling Xiao. Master, 13th Ancestor knows that you have many doubts in your heart, but he can't come out of seclusion yet. This ancient token contains his soul consciousness idol. You can enter it and take a look. Okay. Ling Xiao gently nodded and spread out his soul consciousness, sinking it into the ancient token. Then, the world in front of him suddenly changed, and his figure appeared in a strange, pitch-black space. This space was vast and boundless, pitch-black and ancient. However, under the cover of the darkness, there were all kinds of mysterious auras surging, causing one's heart to palpitate. At the end of the darkness, a clear light suddenly lit up. It was an old and illusory figure, quietly sitting cross-legged. There was no aura around him, like an ordinary old man, but also like an unfathomable abyss. As he sat there, countless strange phenomena appeared between heaven and earth. It was as if the world had changed and the world had just been born, causing one's heart to palpitate in fear. It seemed that this person was the reason why the Ling people were feared by the Realm Lord. You're finally here. A soft sigh sounded leisurely. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed, but there was an inexplicable feeling in his heart. From the tone of the Ling people's ancestor, he didn't hear the same respect as 13th Ancestor Ling. If you have any questions, just ask. Who exactly are you? Ling Zhao's heart moved slightly. After feeling a trace of connection with the realm, he let out a sigh of relief. My name is Cheng Yu, the fourth demon sovereign of the Sky Demon Palace. As expected, Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly, and he nodded silently. How could such a scheming person have such great talent and strategy if he wasn't an all-knowing figure? However, at this time, he didn't sense a trace of demonic intent from this demon sovereign. Instead, he sensed the lethargy of an old man from the human race. It was obvious that this demon sovereign in front of him was near the end of his life. Where did the Ling people come from? Are they not your bloodline inheritance? Yes and no. The cultivation method I cultivate is a bit strange. Back then, in order to escape the prying eyes of the immortal race, I cut off my demonic nature and escaped to this world in my human form, creating the Ling people. This race has my bloodline inheritance, as well as a few former subordinates of the Sky Demon. Cut off your demonic nature? Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with understanding. How did you know that I would be reborn among the Ling people? When I came to the lower world, I seized a wisp of your soul and used my demonic cultivation to seal it in my bloodline reincarnation. A wisp of your soul. Suddenly, Ling Xiao came to a realization. No wonder he didn't have the memories of the Sky Demon and always saw the consciousness of the Sky Demon in the samsara demonic blade. Although he now inherited the will of the Sky Demon, he was not the complete Sky Demon. Therefore, Demon Sovereign Zhong, you didn't submit to him like the 13th ancestor of the Ling people and the others. Perhaps, in his eyes, only the Sky Demon, who stood at the top of the world, was his true master. Have you reached the immortal realm? Ling Xiao guessed that the one who killed the ancestor of the Foliaceae was most likely this demon sovereign. However, his aura was extremely fleeting, and with Ling Xiao's current strength, it was impossible for him to catch a glimpse of it. Immortal Realm? What is a mortal realm? It transcends reincarnation and controls the way of heaven. Unfortunately, the immortal race has suppressed the fate of a mortal world, and no one can break through the acquired realm and step into the innate realm. What about the Realm Master? Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed slightly. From the tone of this demon sovereign, Ling Xiao could hear a deep sense of loneliness. Perhaps, before he severed his demonic nature, he had stepped into that realm, but now he was trapped in the so-called acquired realm and couldn't break through. He has an innate body, so naturally he won't be shackled. However, if I want to kill him, he may not be able to escape. This token contains the soul consciousness of all the experts of the Ling people. This clan will be under your control in the future, but if you want to lead the sky demon back to the 9 heavens, you still have a long way to go. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of Ling Xiao suddenly collapsed, and his soul consciousness reappeared in the great hall of the Ling people. Master, have you seen the ancestor? Ling Yuanqing's expression was gentle, completely different from the ancestor of the Ling people. Yes. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. At this point, he completely understood what this clan meant to him. Whether it was the 13th ancestor Ling in front of him, or the ancestor of the Ling people who had yet to be born, they were just the assistants left to him by Chengyu, the 4th demon sovereign, to fight against the Azure forces, or rather, the Realm Master's palace. As for Gue, Ying, and the others, they were the former subordinates of the Sky Demon. Even if he was just a remnant soul reincarnated, these demon generals couldn't go against him. However, just like Chengyu said, he still had a long way to go before he could return to the 9 heavens. The demon race was declining and hiding in various parts of the 9 heavens. Especially now that the immortal race's master was so powerful, there was no way to resist. And Ling Xiao could only lead the demon race back to the top if he truly had the strength to fight against the immortal race's ancient gods. Chengyu, as the most powerful person in the world who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with the Sky Demon, how could he so easily recognize a remnant soul reincarnated as his master? However, compared to when he was in the Shengzhou, Ling Xiao's wings were fully grown now. The Azure world would be controlled by him sooner or later. That's good. Master, the ancestor, is in seclusion all year round and doesn't know much about the Azure world. If there's anything else you want to know, just ask me. Realm Master's Palace. Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent. He raised his head and looked at the towering divine pillar in the distant sky with a solemn expression. Chapter 9:35. The Realm Lord Palace. Ling Yuanqing nodded and followed Ling Xiao's gaze to the divine pillar. 150,000 years ago, the Realm Lord suddenly appeared with the immortal demon Ancient Bell and suppressed all races in the Azure Sky continent. Later, he established the Realm Lord Palace as the common ruler of the Azure Sky continent. He had 7 palace lords under him, each of them powerful. However, 200 years ago, the Realm Lord suddenly disappeared, and the Azure Sky continent fell into chaos. This pillar doesn't seem simple. Ling Xiao's tone was calm, but his eyes seemed to be filled with thousands of runes, piercing through the sky as he looked at the golden divine pillar. That's right. The ancestral patriarch once said that although this divine pillar seems to be full of immortal charm, it's most likely a trick of the immortals or to suppress the fate of the Azure Sky continent. Does the disappearance of the Realm Lord have anything to do with the Ling people? No. Master, rather than saying that the Realm Lord disappeared, it's better to say that he deliberately hid his tracks. Based on our understanding of this person, it's impossible for him to die. He's most likely hiding behind the scenes and plotting something. Ling Yuanqing sighed. The World Lord is a man of great talent and bold vision. He is from the Immortal Clan. Although he was intimidated by the old ancestor back then, he has always regarded our Ling clan as a great threat for the past tens of thousands of years. Moreover, there are still many forces in the Azure Sky world that have not submitted to him. Therefore, I guess that he must be taking advantage of this opportunity to find an opportunity to destroy our clan and those forces. I see. With Ling Zhao's shrewdness, he naturally understood the deeper meaning of 13th Patriarch Ling's words. The Realm Lord Palace controlled the world. Although it seemed to have unlimited power, any action of the Realm Lord was actually under the eyes of everyone, and his existence was a deterrent. If all races didn't move, how could there be an opportunity? Therefore, only his death or disappearance would arouse greed in people's hearts and cause chaos in the world. When I appeared yesterday, the immortal demon Ancient Bell rang. The Realm Lord Palace must be suspicious. I want you to think of a way to lure the top forces of the Azure Sky continent to Ling people. The immortal demon Ancient Bell was the treasure of the Realm Lord Palace. Although Ling Xiao had the dragon soul to conceal the aura of the sky demon, the date of his birth and the time of the bell's ringing were too similar. Given the relationship between the Realm Lord Palace and the Ling people, they might have their suspicions. Of course, the reason why Ling Xiao caused such a disturbance yesterday was not because he was careless. On the contrary, he wanted everyone to know that he, the young master of Ling people, had appeared today. Ling people thought that their plan was flawless, but Yi Qingchan was ultimately a flaw. Ling Xiao was hiding in the glazed ancient pagoda. However, not long after Yi Qingchan appeared in the Azure Sky world, the immortal devil Ancient Bell rang 9 times in a row. Ling people's concealment would be meaningless once an expert captured them and inspected their soul awareness. Although Ling Xiao had set up a trap in Yi Qingchan's soul sea, this was the Azure Sky world. No one knew if there was anyone in the Realm Lord Palace who was proficient in soul techniques. Therefore, Ling Xiao appeared and saved Yi Qingchan. He used it as an excuse to cause havoc in the Foliaceae. This way, even if someone suspected Ling Xiao and wanted to find clues from Yi Qingchan, they would have to consider whether they could bear the wrath of the Ling people. Of course, suppressing people with power would not last long. What Ling Xiao needed to do next was to prove to all the forces in the Azure Sky world that the day of his birth and the immortal demon Ancient Bell ringing 9 times had nothing to do with each other. At that time, all suspicions would be dispelled. That's easy. I wanted to announce to the Azure Sky world that the young master of Ling people is about to appear. However, Master, according to the ancestors' wishes, the Ling people cannot reveal too much of our heritage. Therefore, I understand. Ling Xiao nodded. Now that the Realm Master was missing, it should have been an opportunity for the Ling people to rise. However, at this time, the Ling people could not act rashly. At the very least, before finding the whereabouts of the Realm Master, the Ling people could not make too big of a move. Otherwise, they would be exposed. Moreover, in this chaotic world, all the forces had their own plans. Once the Ling people revealed a trace of their ambition to dominate the Azure Sky world, they would immediately become the target of public criticism. Although the Ling people were strong, becoming enemies with the entire Azure Sky world would weaken their heritage. The Realm Master, whose whereabouts were unknown, would most likely give the Ling people a fatal blow at the most critical moment. Interesting. On this first day in the Upper Realm, Ling Xiao seemed to have seen a shocking conspiracy. Although it was a conspiracy, it was impossible to refuse. After all, without the Realm Master, the Realm Master's palace was at its weakest. Young Master, your current cultivation, I can kill a half-sage. If that's the case, I can rest assured. Ling Yuanqing smiled knowingly. A cold glint suddenly appeared in his eyes. In the end, although Ling Xiao was the young master of the Ling people, with this background, no one in the Azure Sky world dared to be rude to him. However, in this world, there were always some arrogant people who specialized in slapping the faces of the saint's successors with all kinds of terrifying backgrounds. These people had always been called people of destiny. Now that Ling Xiao had appeared, he wanted to save a lot of trouble. Background was one thing, personal strength was another. The ascension of the Ling people's young master would definitely attract the attention of the world. Taking this opportunity, Ling Yuanxing would let the entire azure sky world witness the terror of the Ling people's young master. He could kill a half-sage. What kind of terrifying cultivation was this? Others might not know, but he knew that Ling Xiao had cultivated for less than 20 years. However, with this kind of cultivation and combat strength, not to mention looking down on his generation, the number of saints under the age of 1,000 in the azure sky world could be counted on one hand. There were 13 branches of the Ling people, and there was no lack of amazing talents among them. Unfortunately, compared to the young master, their talents were like stars compared to the moon. In this way, it would be an honor for the hundreds of prodigies of the Ling people's branches to make Master Ling Xiao a god. Yes, after 18 generations of the Ling people, Ling Xiao was the only direct descendant. However, there are thousands of people in the branch family. In the eyes of 13th ancestor Ling and the others, these people were just pawns in captivity. Since they were pawns, they could be abandoned at any time. 13th ancestor, there's one thing I hope the Ling people can send experts to escort my mother, the moon of Xian Yuan, back to the clan. Ling Zhao's face suddenly became serious. Now that he controlled the life and death of all the Ling people, he was naturally not worried about them betraying him. However, the moon of Xian Yuan wanted to return to the Xian Yuan clan. Without the support of the Ling people, even if she returned, she would not be valued by the Xian Yuan clan. Xian Yuan clan? Don't worry, master. I know what to do. Ling Yuanxing nodded and turned to look at Ling Songming. Songming, you will personally lead the 9 great elders. Yes, 13th ancestor. From beginning to end, Ling Songming had never dared to call Ling Xiao his grandson. Although he was Ling Tianlin's father, Ling Zhao's soul and body were inherited from the sky demon. Ling Tianlin and the moon of Xian Yuan had raised him, but he did not have such an honor. Master, I still have a demon bone among the Ling people. Please follow me. Tomorrow, Ling Xiao waved his hand as if he was a little tired. His figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. 13th ancestor Ling and Ling Songming exchanged glances and walked out of the hall, heading towards the depths of the ancestral land. Chapter 9:36. Realm, Heavenly Palace. Ling Xiao descended from the sky and looked at the moon of Xian Yuan and the others. Mother, I've returned to the Ling people. Xiao, how is it? Did the Ling people acknowledge your identity? Xian Yuan Yu's face carried a touch of concern, and at the same time, a trace of loneliness. Ling Zhao's return meant that they would have to part ways. Although Ling Xiao had the Ling people's protection and had a high status in the Azure world, the moon of Xian Yuan felt sad when she thought about how they would be apart in the future. Mother, don't worry. Everything is under my control. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. When he saw Su Yin, Bai Zhishi, Feng Rouge, and the others' expectant expressions, he immediately smiled and said, Don't worry. I'll take you to travel around the Azure world later. Brother, is there anything I can do? Only Bai Ling looked calm, but her eyes were full of love for Ling Xiao. Ever since she merged with the Heavenly Wheel Elixir Ocean, her cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Now that Ling Xiao had just ascended to the upper realm, he naturally needed to reorganize his forces. She cultivated the Killing Tao, so hiding in the dark would be more helpful to Ling Xiao. Therefore, she had never dreamed of standing beside Ling Xiao. She only wanted to quietly be his shadow. No matter where her brother went, she would always be there to protect him in the dark. Invincible and invincible. No hurry. Let's wait for Double Shadow to find out more about the distribution of forces in the Azure world before we make plans. Ling Xiao smiled gently. Although the Ling people were under his control now, they were a demonic lord. However, this faction was the inheritance of a demon lord. It was impossible for there to be a person with providence in the clan. But these people in front of him all had providence and had their own opportunities. In other words, although the Ling people were his support in the Azure Sky world, if he wanted to fight against the immortals, the ones who could stand by his side in the end were still Phoenix Rouge, Bai Ling, and the others. Let's go. I'll show you guys the Azure Ling people. With a thought, Ling Xiao and the others appeared in the divine palace of Ling people. Ning Bai Jishi, and Huahua were shocked, and they exclaimed again and again. On the other hand, Han Qingxiu, Phoenix Rouge, Lin Meng, Ziyin, and the others were much more steady. However, there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. Let's go. There's no need to be so formal here. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and walked out of the hall first. Behind him, the other women all had happy expressions. However, Ziyin knew the most about the Taigu Ling people, and she was also the one who feared them the most. For the whole day, Ling Xiao and the others wandered around the god battlefield, enjoying the scenery and enjoying the scenery. However, this piece was the beginning of another farewell to the others. There were countless geniuses in the azure sky upper realm. When would there be a day when this path would stop? When night fell, Ling Xiao and the others returned to the main hall. 13th Ancestor Ling and the 9 elders of the Ling people had been waiting for a long time. However, when they saw the women beside Ling Xiao, the Ling people's experts were surprised. They weren't surprised by their young master's affection. It was just that these women were all peerless and had Tao intent. They were all rare geniuses in the world. 13th Ancestor, I wonder if there are any experts in my clan who are accepting disciples. I accept. Just as Ling Xiao's voice fell, an ancient and terrifying aura suddenly shot up from the depths of the ancestral land. Suddenly, a thunderous roar came from the sky. Immediately, a rough-looking and sturdy old man stepped down from the sky and landed in front of Ning Er. His face that was covered in stubble was actually brimming with a wisp of unconcealed joy. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. I never imagined that this old man would actually be able to see such a natural talent in body refinement in my lifetime. Girl, are you willing to be my disciple? I only want my brother, not my master. Ninger took a few steps back in fear and stood beside Ling Xiao. Her eyes were filled with shyness. Her personality was the complete opposite of Bai Jishi's. Bai Jishi was fearless. Even when her cultivation was only at the Paong realm, she was still arrogant and unyielding. Ning, it was the opposite. Even though her talent was ancient and her combat strength was heaven-defying, she still had the temperament of a young girl and was timid. Of course, their personalities were closely related to the environment they grew up in. Bai Jishi had been pampered by the demon emperors and demon kings of the Northern Territory since she was young. Ning Er's background was quite pitiful, so she was destined to have a slightly cowardly personality. It is this old man who has been rude. Greetings, young master. The old man was dressed in sackcloth and bowed respectfully toward Ling Xiao. 11th Ancestor. Behind Ling Xiao, a group of Ling people elders were stunned. Obviously, they did not expect the ancestor of the Ling people to suddenly appear today. So it's the 11th Ancestor. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. He saw that this person's aura was at its peak, and there was a faint sea of blood above his head. It was obvious how strong his physical strength was. Was he another heavenly supreme? Young master, I see that this girl's chi and blood are vigorous, and her divine body is naturally formed. She is a top body refining cultivator. If you can let her cultivate with me, I will definitely help her step into the venerable realm in less than 3 years. Ling Shi's name was Ling Shanhai. He was known as the strongest body refining cultivator in the Azure world. He was not inferior to the Demon Clan Supremes. However, this person had been in seclusion for a long time, and even Ling Xiao did not appear in the upper realm. However, he was shocked by Ning Er's talent and wanted to take her in as a disciple. Ning you can cultivate with the 11th Ancestor. Don't worry, if you want to return to the domain, you can come back anytime. Ling Xiao smiled, and Ning Er's little face immediately showed a hint of reluctance. Oh, ha, girl, don't worry. You will soon be able to crush this generation of Azure World. When that time comes, I will not stop you from going anywhere. Ling Shi laughed and bowed to Ling Xiao again. Then, he took Ning and went into the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land. Young master, I know of an ancestor who has just woken up from his seclusion. This female ancestor is proficient in both the Tao of alchemy and the Tao of sword refining. She is very strong. Ling Yuanqing shook his head and smiled bitterly. The 11th ancestor was boorish and did not stick to one style, but his strength was far above his. He just did not know what kind of disciple he would be able to teach given his character. Tao of alchemy and the Tao of sword refining? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. Qingqiu, you can cultivate with this ancestor. Yes, young master. Although there was reluctance in Han Qingqiu's eyes, she understood that strength was the foundation of following the young master. All right, the few of you, follow the ancestor and cultivate well. Everyone else, do not slack off, Ling Xiao said indifferently. Then, he led Bai Zixi and the others to the border of the realm of gods. Although the girls' talents were heaven-defying, their cultivation methods were all from the Shengzhou continent. In the Azure world, they had no power to speak of. With the personal guidance of the Ling people's ancestors, whether it was Han Qingqiu or Ning, their cultivation and battle strength would definitely improve. As for Su Yin, Bai Zixi, Phoenix Rouge, and the others, Ling Xiao would naturally find a most suitable path for them. Although there was an endless amount of spirit qi and fortune in the realm of gods, for those with heaven's mandate, life and death was the fastest way to reach the top. Stop. But, just as Ling Xiao's figure was about to disappear, another figure appeared in the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land. At the same time, a cold shout resounded through the world. A graceful figure in a purple robe slowly walked over from the horizon. Her celestial appearance was peerless, and even her temperament was extremely domineering. Chapter 9:37. Ling Xiao frowned, and there seemed to be Taoist rhymes circulating in his palm. Although he didn't believe that anyone would dare to attack him in the Ling people's temple, it was obvious that this woman didn't come with good intentions. Her purple robe fluttered in the wind, and she looked like a fairy. Her skin was fair and translucent, and even her hair was shining with divine light. Especially her eyes, which were actually a faint purple color. They were strange, but there was also an inexplicable sense of vicissitudes in them. There was a layer of dense divine light around her, which blocked the heavenly Tao's aura and contained a wisp of ancient intent. Ouch! But, just as Ling Xiao was secretly guessing the woman's identity, he saw her suddenly tremble and fall from the sky in an unbelievable posture, crashing into Ling Xiao's arms. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes and took a few steps back. Then, he hid to the side as the woman looked embarrassed and angry. Mas. Ahem, young master, you're still as cold and heartless as ever. The purple-robed woman snorted, but she didn't hide the trace of joy in her eyes. She stood in front of Ling Xiao just like that, her pair of purple eyes staring straight at him, a bright and beautiful smile at the corner of her mouth. I've been waiting for you for so long. Who are you? Ling Xiao looked indifferent, but he already had a guess in his heart. He understood many things from the vicissitudes in the woman's eyes. The primordial sky demon was domineering and unparalleled. How could such a man not have admirers around him? Since this woman was among the Ling people, she must be one of the sky demon's former subordinates that Zhongyu mentioned. Young master, you really don't remember me? I'm so sad. I've been waiting for you to come back for the past 190,000 years. The purple-robed woman's face was sad, and her eyes were filled with tears. She looked delicate and sad. Ninth ancestor, be careful with your words. Ling Yuanqing's expression changed, and he hurriedly reminded her. What ninth ancestor? Your whole family is made up of ninth ancestors. Am I that old? Call me Misty from now on. The purple-robed woman glared fiercely at Ling Yuanqing as she spoke in an ice-cold tone. Ling Xiao could smell a refreshing fragrance on her body. At the same time, the Wind Dao Law and Dream Dao Law on her body were terrifying as well. Her strength was clearly above that of the 11th ancestor, Ling Xiao. At this moment, Ling Xiao was a little suspicious. Could the division of the Ling people's patriarchs be based on strength? Is there anything else? If you don't have anything else, then move aside. Of course, no matter who this woman was, she posed no threat to Ling Xiao. Moreover, this kind of unreasonable character was really not in line with Ling Xiao's taste. Master, do you really not remember me? A wisp of disappointment finally flickered in the violet-robed woman's eyes when she heard this, and a strand of sorrow seemed to flow from her bones. Who are you? Demonic Feather King, Mystic Butterfly greets Master. At this moment, there are only a few elders of the Ling people's direct bloodline, and by Ji and the other girls in this area. Thus, this Sky Demon Palace expert did not conceal her identity at all. As expected, an old subordinate of the Sky Demon, Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. He did not expect that this seemingly crazy and beautiful woman was also an ancient figure, and a demon king at that. Master, did you just say that you want to find a master for these girls? Although I, Mystic Butterfly, am not the strongest person of the Ling people, in terms of comprehension of the great Tao, I do not lose to anyone. You will follow me and cultivate in the future. Mystic Butterfly stretched out her hand and pointed at Bai Ji, Hua, and Ziyin. Hearing this, the three girls' pretty faces immediately revealed a trace of distress, especially Bai Ji, who hid behind Ling Xiao with a face full of fear, her little head shaking like a rattle drum. I don't want to cultivate with this crazy woman. Sir, please don't make me go with her. However, at this moment, a trace of a smile appeared in Ling Xiao's eyes. Whether it was Hua or Bai Ji, they had lazy personalities. If they were not strolling around in the realms, they would be gluttonous. As for this Feather King, she most likely had some feelings for the Sky Demon and was somewhat jealous of Hua and the others. However, she was a servant and did not dare to act recklessly. Thus, Hua and Bai Ji would only suffer physical pain, but their lives would not be in danger. Giving the two girls to her would be a good way to supervise her cultivation. Hua and Ji can cultivate with this ninth ancestor. Ziyin does not need to. Ling Xiao said indifferently. Ziyin immediately transformed into her original form and threw herself into Ling Xiao's arms, as if she was afraid that he would change his mind. Why? Bai Ji frowned, clearly unwilling. However, when she saw Ling Xiao's expression, she immediately lost her temper and did not say anything. She only pouted and looked like she was about to cry. Oof. You want to become the young master's woman? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others with such strength? Don't worry, young master. I will definitely discipline them strictly. Bewitching Butterfly snorted coldly. Meanwhile, Ling Xiao had already disappeared into the distance with Ziyin in his arms. Master, this time, I will let Bewitching Butterfly accompany you in a battle of immortals. Bewitching Butterfly's expression immediately turned cold as she looked at the figure in the darkness. Above her head, a pair of black wings silently spread out, enveloping the sky and covering the moon and stars, emanating endless demonic intent. The deity battle domain, the border. Ling Songming and several Ling people's elders have been waiting for a long time. They only bowed when Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky. Greetings, young master. You are the Xianyuan people. Do not act recklessly. Ling Xiao said indifferently. With a thought, the moon of Xianyuan, Mengyuan, and Lin Meng appeared before everyone. However, when the moon of Xianyuan saw Ling Songming, who was at the front of the crowd, a complicated look flickered in her eyes. Greetings, Lord of the Ling people. Long time no see, you. In the end, although Ling Xiao didn't have any feelings for Ling Songming, the moon of Xianyuan was his daughter-in-law. Back then, her marriage with Ling Tianlin had been arranged by Ling Songming. No matter how much resentment the moon of Xianyuan felt, she still maintained some poise at this moment. Mother, remember to send me a message if there's anything. Minder can stay by my side. I will find a good place for her. Ling Xiao now had a sufficient understanding of the factions in the Azure Sky World. He did see an ancient sect in Zhuge Yuntian's memories. It was called the Sacred Fire Divine Sect. It was also a large sect in the Azure Sky world and was extremely powerful. As for the successor of this sect, Ling Xiao had some guesses. This person cultivated the Tao of Pill Fire. It was said that he had fused with a heaven and earth spirit fire when he was in the God the Archrealm. His talent was extraordinary and peerless, which was why he was elected as the young master of his sect. However, it was said that he had suffered from a hidden injury when he fused with the heaven and earth spirit fire and often suffered from a backlash. If Ling Xiao's guess was right, this young master of the Sacred Fire Divine sect was most likely cultivating the blazing scripture passed down by Elder Ling. As for the backlash from the heaven and earth spirit fire, it was probably related to the incomplete blazing scripture he cultivated. Given Elder Ling's talent, how could he not have a backup plan even if he had been plotted against by a disciple and died? Logically speaking, this young master of the Sacred Fire Divine sect should be a small climax for Ling Xiao after he ascended to the upper realm. However, Ling Xiao now planned to avenge Elder Ling and help the Sacred Fire Divine sect find a new young master at the same time. After all, the grace of a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Since Elder Ling generously gave the blazing scripture to me, how can I forget this kindness? I, Ling Xiao, am righteous and kind. The world should take me as an example. F***CK. Chapter 9:38. This alright. The moon of Xinyuan was silent for a long time before nodding. She naturally had the deepest feelings for Lin Meng among all the women by Ling Xiao's side. However, in the end, the moon of Xinyuan saw these women as not only Ling Xiao's concubines, but also the power he controlled. Ling Xiao most likely had his reasons for keeping Lin Meng, so she could not say much. Thank you, clan master. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. He watched Ling Songming, the moon of Xinyuan, and the others disappear into the night before waving his hand to summon Xiao Tong out of the realm. My lord, this place is wow. What dense spirit energy. Could this be the Azure Sky world? Xiao Tong's expression was one of shock and exaggeration. Ling Xiao glanced at him indifferently and said calmly, You haven't returned for 300 years. I believe you miss your family and friends. Go. My lord, you mean? Xiao Tong's fat face trembled. Then, as if thinking of something, he straightened his back and said solemnly, my lord must be joking. How can family and family be more important than my duty? My duty now is to protect my lord and accompany my lord in conquering the world. How could I dare to be greedy for personal matters before my wish is fulfilled? You're really not going back? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. My lord, are you really willing to let me return? Xiao Tong's eyes trembled as he probed. Keep this voice transmission talisman well. If you need anything, send me a voice transmission at any time. Ling Xiao casually tossed a voice transmission talisman to Xiao Tong and turned to head into the depths of the divine battle domain. Xiao Bo, on the other hand, stared blankly at the departing figure. He was stunned for a long time before tears suddenly appeared in his eyes. He did not have deep feelings for the Xiao clan. However, he still had a younger sister in the clan. He wondered how she had been for the past 300 years. My lord, when this humble Xiao returns home to visit my younger sister, I will immediately return to repay your kindness. As soon as he finished speaking, a wisp of a sincere expression appeared on Xiao Po's face for the first time, and he bowed deeply towards Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao just waved his hand and didn't even turn his head. Desolate had already submitted and would definitely not betray him. Now that he had returned to the Desolate clan, according to the plot, he would most likely have to go through some hardships. At that time, Ling Xiao's role would be the 100,000 divine soldiers that would descend from the heavens to help him control the Xiao clan. In this way, the Yi and Xiao clans had become Ling Xiao's arms. Ling Xiao finally had his own foundation in the Azure Sky world. With all the chess pieces in place, the game was about to unfold. However, this time, Ling Xiao's opponent was no longer Yi Luoyin alone. Instead, It was countless experts from the ancient times who were even more terrifying than him. For example, the realm master who had gone missing. His shrewdness and boldness were enough to make Ling Xiao wary. In order to truly conquer this realm, Ling Xiao had to do something different from what he had done in the lower realm. He had to suppress the four realms and then use the power of the four realms to destroy the ruler of this realm. This was the Azure Sky World. There were tens of thousands of galaxies and countless forces. Even if Ling people were powerful, it was still wishful thinking for him to fight against tens of thousands of sects and regions by himself. Therefore, Ling Xiao decided to change his strategy this time. He wanted to personally stir up chaos in this world and then become the only savior of the world. Young master, they've all left. It's suddenly a little lonely. Phoenix Rouge, Su Yin, and Lin Meng followed behind Ling Xiao, looking a little lonely. Bai Ling was still cultivating in the realm. For this woman who had once lost her cultivation and the right to follow Ling Xiao, nothing was more important than cultivation. She had lost something and regained it, so it was precious. Oh, if there was anything more important, it would be her brother. Rouge, this realm is vast and boundless. Don't you want to go out and explore? Ling Xiao turned to Phoenix Rouge. Although this woman always thought she was the villain, in reality, her luck was much higher than Lin Meng and the others. Me? I'd better not. I'll just stay by your side and help you take care of the realm. Phoenix Rouge shook her head. With her unscrupulous nature, she naturally didn't want to do anything risky. Moreover, with all the women gone, she had the chance to monopolize the young master. That's fine. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, but a cold face gradually became clearer in front of him. Gu Chao Ci. Although Ling Xiao knew from the first time he saw this woman that her cultivation would be terrifying, but he seemed to have underestimated Gu Chao Ci's strength. The immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty was the top celestial dynasty in the Azure world. Although it wasn't undying, it controlled countless territories. Gu Chao Ci ascended the throne at the age of 100 and became an empress. Her name was enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the young master of the Realm Lord's palace. Unparalleled beauty, the first empress of the Azure world. More importantly, in Zhuge Yuntian's memory, this empress was the only obsession of countless young geniuses in the Azure world. The path to immortality was vast. Those under 1,000 years old could be considered a generation. Gu Chao Ci only used 200 years to enter the Saint realm. Originally, in everyone's eyes, she was enough to create a new era and become the next empress of the Azure world. But for some unknown reason, in the past year, the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty suddenly changed. This empress was removed from the throne by the Gu clan and confined deep in the palace. Ling Xiao didn't know if this change had anything to do with her divided soul, but if anyone in the Gu clan dared to hurt her, Ling Xiao didn't mind making them disappear from the Azure world. Although Ling people couldn't enter the world now to avoid being schemed against by the Realm Lord. Gu Chao Ci couldn't be humiliated. When the Ling people's young master ceremony came to an end, Ling Xiao would be completely free of the suspicion of the Sky Demon. It was time to meet this empress. 13th ancestor, bring me to the place where the demon bone is sealed. In the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land, Ling Xiao followed Ling Yuanxing to a tall mountain. This mountain was tens of thousands of feet high. Above them was the Milky Way of the galaxy. There were layers of Taoist rhymes that formed the void and covered heaven's secrets. At the peak of the mountain, a black ancient palace stood quietly, exuding boundless vastness. There seemed to be divine light rippling inside, turning into the most mysterious and ancient, experiencing thousands of reincarnations. Young master, this is the forbidden area of the Ling people. There is a demon bone enshrined here, as well as the great Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth that the Ling people have accumulated over 100,000 years. Ling Yuanxing's eyes were solemn, but there was also a hint of excitement. To them, the Sky Demon was their faith. Ling people used the power of the clan to gather the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth here to nourish the demon bone, hoping that one day the bone would reappear in heaven and earth. 13th ancestor. Do you know how many demon bones there are? Ling Xiao looked up and saw that there seemed to be a spirit spiral that connected heaven and earth, gathering all the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth here. In that spirit spiral, Ling Xiao could see countless divine elephants evolving, dynasties changing, withered trees sprouting, immortals and Buddhas falling, and then being reborn. There was a mysterious fate of life and death flowing in it, making one feel as if they could see the true meaning of reincarnation. 100,000 years of accumulation. Not to mention the demon bone, just the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth gathered in this palace could be said to be supreme creation. From what I know, Shengzhou has 3 Taoist rhymes of heaven, and Shengzhou has 3. Chapter 9, 39. 3 demonic bones are sealed in the azure heaven domain. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes. If that was the case, there should be 6 demonic bones. Once he fused with the 6 demonic bones, his sky demon body would enter the 4th refinement realm. That's right, the Ling people have one. According to our investigation, the other one should be sealed in the Daotian Academy and guarded by a 9th heavenly sovereign. The Ling people have spent tens of thousands of years searching for the last one, but we still haven't found any traces of it. Ling Yuanqing sighed. He didn't know what the sky demon's remains meant to Ling Xiao. However, the celestial race had sealed it with great means. It was obvious that they were afraid of it. I should know where the last one is. Ling Xiao smiled. 8 Desolation Glazed Pagoda. Since this pagoda was in Yi Qingchan's hands, there must be some shocking secrets in it. When Feng Ling was born, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with his aura. It was obvious that she had seen the demonic bones before. If Ling Xiao's guess was right, there should be a demonic bone sealed in the 9th level of the glazed ancient pagoda. If that was the case, the 6 demonic bones would be completely found. However, the Daotian Academy was a little troublesome. From Zhuge Yuntian's memories, Ling Xiao already knew that although there were countless forces in the Azure Heaven domain, the most powerful forces were in the center of the domain and the most remote areas. The 4 extremes of the Azure Heaven domain were occupied by the demons, ghosts, Buddhas, and Xianyuan. Each had a long history and shocking means. The demon race's bloodline had a long history and lived as long as the heavens. Ghosts were crafty and could control corpses and revive souls. Their divine senses were unparalleled. The Buddhist Holy Land was worshipped by all living beings and flourishing with incense. Xianyuan had barbarians and sacrificial warriors who followed them for generations. They respected the human emperor's heaven-sealing divine technique. In the center of the Azure Heaven domain, there were also a few forces that occupied the heavens and earth. The Daotian Academy was one of them. However, this academy was not attached to the World Lord Palace and did not have any interactions with the Ling people. The Daotian Academy was founded by a supreme master of the human clan who believed in education without discrimination. He swore that every aspiring disciple of the human clan would have a fair place to cultivate. The master of the academy was respectfully called a saint by the people of the world. He was currently the strongest person in the Azure world apart from the Realm Lord. A 9th grade heavenly sovereign was invincible in the mortal world. It was said that this saint studied hundreds of classics and collected famous scrolls from all over the world. He was divided into 1 residence and 4 courtyards, and he cultivated Confucianism and Taoism. Even now, every 100 years, this residence master would still appear and preach the Tao. The discussion of the Tao by the saints was also a grand event in the Azure firmament. Of course, no one knew if this grade 9 heavenly sovereign had stepped into the 1st grade Great Emperor realm. However, the Daotian Academy was the holy land in the hearts of all human cultivators in the Azure Sky world. Even the current masters of the top forces might have listened to the sages' preaching when they were young. It could be said that this saint was almost equivalent to the teacher of the entire human race. My lord knows. That couldn't be better. However, I'm afraid that the Daotian Academy will be a little troublesome. This saint has lived for a long time and has a high prestige in the Azure Sky world. He has disciples all over the world. If Ancestor Zhongyu were to take action, he might be able to eliminate him without anyone knowing. However, the few ancestors who have awakened now do not have the ability to do so. Ling Yuanqing sighed softly. Ancestor Zhongyu had killed the heavenly sovereign of the Foliaceae the day before, which had already attracted the attention of many forces. If he were to eliminate this saint, he was afraid that he would put the Ling people in the eye of the storm, which was not in line with the plan of the Ling people. No need. Let's wait a little longer. Ling Xiao shook his head. There were not many people in the Azure Sky world who could eliminate a grade 9 heavenly sovereign. Once Zhongyu took action and killed this famous human clan saint, he was afraid that he would completely fall into the trap of the Realm Lord. Furthermore, Ling Xiao suspected that the Realm Lord of the Azure Sky world might be suspicious of the relationship between the Ling people and the Sky Demon. He just did not have evidence. From the looks of it, the situation that Ling Xiao was facing now was 10,000 times more dangerous than the Shengzhou. Even if he had the Ling people behind him, he could not afford to be careless. The reason why the Ling people were so powerful and respected was that they were a force of the human clan in everyone's eyes. In a sense, they carried the hope of the human clan. At the end of the day, the Realm Lord Palace was a force used by the Immortal Clan to control the Azure Sky world. Apart from the ancient clans who had sided with the Immortal Clan, the Realm Lord Palace was in a hostile relationship with the other forces. However, the Realm Lord was tyrannical. He alone held the immortal demon Ancient Bell and suppressed the myriad star domains. This created the prosperity and stability of the Azure Sky world for nearly 100,000 years. In the end, behind this stability was the forbearance and dormancy of the various human clan forces. The Ling people were now the hope of many human clan forces to resist the Realm Lord Palace and even the Immortal Clan. However, once the news that the Ling people were the descendants of the Demon Clan was leaked, they would immediately become the target of public criticism. Therefore, this chess game could not be rushed. Ling Zhao's eyes were deep. He was already secretly planning how to make the various forces of the Azure Sky world completely vent their dissatisfaction with the Realm Lord Palace. Young Master, Ling Yuanqing looked at the young man in front of him with a thoughtful expression. Although Ling Xiao looked young, his scheming were heaven-defying. Moreover, his current strength was enough to fight against the Saint Realm. It probably wouldn't be long before he had the battle strength of the top of the Azure Sky world. At that time, it would be the opportunity for the Sky Demon Palace to rise again. In fact, Ling Yuanqing had a vague feeling that the Lord in front of him had already thought of a countermeasure to deal with the Realm Lord Palace. I'll fuse with the Demon Bone first. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and walked toward the palace in front of him. Only when his figure disappeared did Ling Yuanqing bow and disappear on the spot. Buzz! As Ling Xiao raised his hand and pushed open the door of the ancient stone palace, a golden light suddenly lit up from the void. Endless array patterns revealed the azure sky, revealing an ancient and complicated mystical aura. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear as he stepped into the layers of divine light. Suddenly, strange phenomena appeared before his eyes. Divine mountains stood tall, celestial palaces descended, and ancient seas surged. These various phenomena and changes of epochs gave off an extremely profound feeling of time flowing. It was obvious that this ancient palace at the peak of the mountain had been transformed into an independent space by someone. The array that enveloped this place was the key to devouring the spiritual aura of heaven and earth that 13th Ancestor Ling had mentioned. Finally, Ling Xiao stopped in his tracks and looked at a bluestone altar in the center of the palace. On the altar, there was a translucent leg bone quietly standing there. This demon bone was completely different from the remains of the sky demon that Ling Xiao had seen before. Countless strands of divine intent were entwined on it, flowing and twisting, forming the virtual images of ancient gods and demons. They were vast and powerful, but there was no trace of demon intent. Ling Zhao's expression was calm, and there was not much surprise in his eyes. Given Zheng Yu's means, since he dared to openly worship this demon bone among the Ling people, he must have enough confidence that the experts of the Azure Sky world would not be able to detect any clues. After 100,000 years of nourishment, this demon bone already had a divine nature, and even a strand of its power was comparable to that of a prime expert, as expected of the supreme sky demon. This is shocking. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, and demon intent seemed to ripple around him, turning into a demonic shadow that stood behind him. The entire ancient palace suddenly bloomed with spiritual aura, covering up the endless demon intent. However, the remains of the sky demon seemed to have sensed something. They suddenly trembled and flew toward Ling Xiao. Chapter 940. Boom! Boundless demonic intent and immortal aura instantly enveloped Ling Xiao's figure. At this moment, he could feel that every inch of his skin had become crystal clear under the nourishment of the immortal aura, containing traces of divine intent. And his aura also began to rise the moment the demonic bone entered his body. Boom! Above the ancient palace, a beam of immortal light suddenly shot into the sky, shattering the clouds and reaching the 9 heavens. The void of the entire azure world churned, and countless miraculous scenes began to appear in the thousands of star domains. Countless experts in seclusion walked out of their clans and looked towards the center of the azure world. The sky there had long been covered by divine light. It was golden and dazzling, as if an immortal god had descended to the world, revealing a domineering aura. At the same time, the 4 poles of the azure world were also emitting multicolored light that rushed into the clouds, faintly resonating with a miraculous scene in the center of the world. Countless spiritual traces appeared one after another, and a wave of spiritual energy that was several times denser than before suddenly swept through the entire azure world. Spiritual energy awakening. An ancient aura awakened from the depths of the mountains, and there was a strong sense of surprise in their eyes. As early as 100,000 years ago, many powerful cultivators had already noticed that the spiritual energy of the azure world was weaker than before. Although this world was vast and boundless, this subtle weakening was not obvious. In fact, due to the passage of time and the gap between generations, many cultivators instinctively thought that the spiritual energy of this world was originally like this. But in reality, as the many ancestors of the Ling people guessed, the pillar that connected to the Realm Lord's palace to the sky was perhaps the immortal race's method of suppressing the destiny of the ordinary realm. The birth of a demon, the chaos of the azure world, has finally begun. Many ancient and terrifying auras stood at the peak of the sky, looking towards the center of the azure world and the 4 poles. Everyone knew that the sects and ancient clans that could stand at the center of this world were definitely the top forces in this world. And unlike ordinary worlds, there were 4 equally terrifying forces in the azure world. Even the Realm Lord back then could not completely tame them. But although these 4 forces did not submit, they had to restrain themselves and hide in remote areas of this world. Yet now, along with divine radiance rising from the 4 extremes, everyone knew that the azure sky boundary would probably fall into extreme chaos for the next 100 years. When geniuses were born, they had to fight for hegemony. Since the Realm Master had gone missing, the sects that had been suppressed in the desolate wasteland would definitely take this opportunity to reclaim their territories. Of course, although Brahma Holy Land was in the far west, it wasn't suppressed by the Realm Lord. Rather, it was willing to hide from the world and avoid karma. However, this was not the case for the Ghost, Demon, and Xinyuan clans. However, what was slightly strange was that the divine light in the center of the azure sky did not come from the Realm Lord's palace. Instead, it came from the Taigu Ling people. The divine splendor didn't decline for 7 days. Immortal multicolored light, extending for millions and millions of league golden mists, descended from the sky, surging with great momentum. In the end, everyone only saw 5 heaven-reaching divine lights illuminating the heaven and earth. They were located in the north, south, east, west, and the center respectively. They complemented each other from a distance, as if they were illuminating the arrival of a great era. During these 7 days, Ling Yuanxing had already sent out invitations according to Ling Zhao's instructions, inviting the top forces in the center of the azure sky to come and observe the ceremony. Originally, many forces were very curious about the Taigu Ling people. In other words, in the past hundreds of thousands of years, there were very few people who were fortunate enough to step into the territory of the Ling people. However, now that the young master of the Ling people had appeared, it gave everyone a chance to take a peek at the mysteries of this race. It was even said that the young master of the Realm Lord's palace had already stepped out of the palace uninvited and headed towards the deity battle domain. For a time, the entire azure sky world was in an uproar. Countless powerful spiritual auras streaked across the sky and descended on the deity battle domain. It could be said that the appearance of a young master of the Ling people was far more sensational than the Tao Heaven Sage's lecture. After all, the Tao Heaven Sage's lecture was only attended by the younger generation of the azure sky world. Occasionally, some ancient existences would descend, but they were only trying to determine their own Tao hearts and find opportunities to break through from the Tao discussions of others. However, in these 7 days, all those who descended on the deity battle domain were famous figures in the azure sky world. To be invited by the Ling people to attend the ceremony in the deity battle domain was a kind of honor for many forces. Therefore, apart from the young master of the Realm Lord's palace, Shuexian, all the other forces had sent their clan masters and patriarchs to show their respect. In front of the main hall of the Ling people's palace, Ling Tsangming stood with his hands behind his back as he looked at the divine light falling from the sky. Behind him, the 9 elders of the main branch stood side by side. Behind them were the many elders and branch masters of the Ling people's branch families. Around the main hall, 3,000 black demon guards stood in formation, holding long halberds in their hands. They were like statues guarding the faith in their hearts. To put it bluntly, just these Ling people powerhouses in front of the hall were enough to destroy almost 90% of the forces in the azure sky world. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg of the Ling people. Ha! I didn't think that the Daotian Academy would be fortunate enough to participate in the grand event of the Ling people. It is truly an honor. In the air, an aged and heroic laughter rang out. A majestic silhouette descended from the heavens, landing on the ground with a single step. Around him, tens of thousands of spiritual light bloomed. It was like a sun, blinding everyone's eyes. The current master of the puppet house of the Daotian Academy, Hong Guji, was a 7th-level saint. Although this person had a rough appearance and a bold and unrestrained personality, what truly caused the Azure world to fear was not his cultivation of the saint realm, but his achievements in the Tao of puppetry. It was said that Hong Guji was born in a prosperous clan in the azure sky world, but he was born of a concubine and was ridiculed by everyone. When he was 18 years old, he suddenly displayed unparalleled talent in puppetry and refined all 108 members of his clan into puppets. Since then, his name had spread throughout the world. He had been in the azure sky world for 900 years and dared to call himself a master. He had fought with countless powerhouses. Although he had lost, he had never suffered a great defeat until he met the master of the Daotian Academy. He was shocked by the great wish of the human saint. After that, he joined the academy and cut off all enmity. He became a master of the puppet house, one of the 4 academies. Now, the puppet house had disciples all over the world. Most of them were famous for their exquisite puppetry techniques, especially the first disciple of the puppet house, Wenren Jiga, who had inherited Hong Guji's talent in puppetry. He became a saint at 200 years old and comprehended the great Tao of puppetry. With a thought, he could make all living things into puppets. He was a famous genius in the Azure Sky world. At this moment, a black-robed young man stood quietly behind Hong Guji. His face was pale and gloomy. If he hadn't been famous in the world, he would have been killed as an evil cultivator. The Taigu Ling people were the most mysterious and powerful ancient clan in the Azure Sky world. This clan had never appeared in the world, but a young master had appeared in this chaotic world. No one would believe that this clan didn't have the ambition to rule the world. However, because of the Ling people's special status, they wouldn't do much at this juncture. And this young master was probably shouldering all the hopes of the Ling people. However, just what kind of talent did the Ling people think so highly of him that they would announce to the world and welcome him with such a grand ceremony? So, it's Academy Master Hong. The Ling people are honored to have Academy Master Hong here. Ling Songming's expression was calm. Although his tone was polite, there was no respect on his face. Chapter 941. Ha! Lord of the Ling people, you are too courteous. In order to welcome young Master Ling, I have personally selected a supreme ability as a congratulatory gift. I hope you will accept it. Hong Guji laughed heartily. He waved his hand. An array of golden light landed in Ling Songming's hand. You are too courteous. President Hong, please. Ling Songming smiled faintly as several figures approached from the distant horizon. However, at this moment, all the spectating powerhouses were shocked as they looked at the dozen supreme beings and sage-stage elders in front of the hall. Everyone in the Azure Sky world knew of Ling Songming's strength. However, this Lord of the Ling people was only the ruler of the Ling people on the surface. The true foundation of the Ling people was the patriarchs who had not appeared for a long time. Someone had done a detailed investigation on the number of Ling people's patriarchs. It was said that there were at least 5 patriarchs in this clan, and their cultivations were all above Ling Songming's. In other words, the Ling people had 5 heavenly sovereigns. What kind of terrifying foundation was this? To give a simple example, although the Foliaceae had declined, they were still a famous ancient clan in the Azure Sky world. However, this clan had only had one heavenly sovereign patriarch, who had unfortunately died under the Ling people's ancient order a few days ago. To be able to kill a heavenly sovereign from hundreds of millions of miles away, even if it was just a first-grade heavenly sovereign, the strength of this Ling people powerhouse had probably reached the peak and surpassed the heavenly sovereign level. In this great world, the great emperor was the pinnacle of the human race. It could even be said that every great emperor in this world was the true fortune of the human race. Even though the Daotian Academy was famous and had 1 billion disciples, the lord of this academy was still a heavenly sovereign and had yet to take the final step. Of course, even if he was a 9th-grade heavenly sovereign, no one in the Azure Sky world would dare to underestimate this human race saint. The cultivation techniques that he cultivated were really heterogeneous, and his understanding of the Tao was not something that ordinary people could compare to. However, from this, it could be seen that Ling people had a strong foundation. The Grand Elder of the profound Hong Immortal Sect, He Yunli, has arrived. Qin He, the chief of the Crane Mansion, has arrived. The 4 protectors of the Great Sun God Sect have arrived. Ling people's earth-shattering names were shouted out by the elders in charge of welcoming guests. Soon, countless powerful experts from ancient orthodoxies had gathered in front of the Ling people's temple. The young lord of the Realm Lord Palace, Xue Shiyin, has arrived. Until a handsome figure in white suddenly appeared between heaven and earth. The originally noisy square of the divine temple suddenly became dead silent. All the sect leaders, elders, and successors raised their heads and looked at the young man who was slowly walking over. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. In the entire Azure Sky realm, everyone knew about the relationship between the Realm Lord Palace and the Taigu Ling people. These 2 great forces seemed to be in harmony at the center of the Azure Sky continent. However, Only those who truly controlled the world and the leaders of countless forces in the star regions under their command understood that this harmony was more like a compromise. How could they allow others to sleep peacefully beside their bed? The reason why the Realm Lord Palace was willing to give up half of the land in the center of the Azure Sky realm to the Ling people was most likely because they had no other choice. Otherwise, look at the Xianyuan Emperor clan and the Ghost Demon clan. Even if they had many powerful experts and a strong foundation, weren't they still driven to the desolate land of the four extremes by the Realm Lord? However, today, the young master of the Ling people had appeared. What was the young master of the Realm Lord Palace's intention for coming here? Moreover, it was rumored that this young master controlled the supreme weapon of the Realm Lord Palace. Wasn't he afraid that the Ling people would be tempted by his wealth and make him stay in the Ling people forever? The supreme weapon played an important role in the Realm Lord's ability to suppress the Azure Sky realm. Now that he had been missing for more than 200 years, regardless of whether he had died or not, if the Ling people could seize this opportunity to snatch the supreme weapon away, the Azure Sky realm would definitely change owners. Above the Azure Sky realm, Shuexian was dressed in white. His aura was ethereal, and there was an indescribable charm about him. In particular, his almost perfect celestial appearance caused many of the female successors of the ancient sects to feel ashamed of their inferiority. That pair of black starry eyes seemed to contain the aura of the entire world. They were deep and indifferent. He stood above everyone. Even though he was only 300 years old, he made many Supremes who had lived for countless years feel an inexplicable pressure. If it weren't for the fact that the young master of the Realm Lord Palace had appeared long ago, many people would have thought that he was the Azure Sky Realm Lord, a young emperor who looked down on the world. Young Master Shui, what a rare guest. Ling Songming's eyes narrowed, and his expression darkened when he saw the white-robed figure standing behind Shuexian. The Realm Lord Palace had stood at the Azure Sky realm for hundreds of thousands of years, not only because of the Azure Sky Realm Lord's supreme cultivation, but also because of the immortal demon Ancient Bell. The 7 palace masters under the Realm Lord also contributed greatly to this. The person in front of them was the Palace Lord of the Starfall Palace, Lu Xinghe. It was rumored that this person cultivated the divine power of the stars and was the only Palace Lord who had appeared among the 7 Palace Lords. He was also the Tao protector of the young master of the Realm Lord Palace, Shuexian. One of the 10 Azure Sky sacred swords, the Star Mark, was in his hands. Ling People's Lord. Shuexian smiled gently and tilted her head to look at Lu Xinghe, only to see that there seemed to be divine armaments around the latter as he descended from the sky in the form of a sea of stars. A decree floated silently in the sea of stars, and it contained the might to seal the heavens and shake the earth. This heaven-sealing imperial decree is the most precious treasure of the Realm Lord Palace. Treat it as a congratulatory gift for the birth of young Master Shuexian to the Ling people. Shuexian's voice was clear, and no emotions could be heard from it. However, a dark look flashed across the eyes of Ling, Songming, and the other Ling people's experts. The heaven-sealing imperial decree was the symbol of the Realm Lord status. This decree didn't have any earth-shattering power, but it had an extraordinary meaning. It was a decree that the Realm Lord had to issue before slaughtering thousands of races. In other words, Shuexian was giving this decree to the Ling people. Although it seemed like she was lowering her stance, there was a hint of compromise. However, this decree symbolized an unparalleled tyrannical power. Now that the Azure Sky continent was in chaos, all the ancient races and sects wanted to fight for hegemony. The Ling people originally wanted to keep a low profile and find a good opportunity. However, Shuexian's actions today had unknowingly pushed the Ling people to the forefront of this era. The Realm Lord had disappeared, and the Realm Lord Palace's rule was like thin ice after spring. Although it wouldn't melt immediately, it no longer had the power to dominate the world. Therefore, the people that the various factions were more afraid of were the Taigu Ling people. What a scheming eye! Ha ha ha! What a great gift indeed! Ling Songming smiled, but he was hesitating in his heart about whether he should take this opportunity to leave Xue Shiyin and Lu Xinghe with the Ling people. Buzz! Just as everyone in front of the palace was pondering, an immortal radiance suddenly appeared in the depths of the Ling people's territory and covered the sky. Dao sounds resounded, and Dao runes appeared in the sky. Auspicious purple clouds rose from the east and turned into the sun, moon, and stars. They contained the power of the ancient heavens and suddenly fell. At this moment, whether it was Xue Shiyin or those supremes who had lived for tens of thousands of years, their eyes flashed with surprise. Dao manifested in form, and it was the will of the heavens. It seemed that this young master of the Ling people was truly immortal and had the potential to become an emperor. Chapter 942. Ling Xiao was sitting cross-legged in the ancient palace. He was dressed in black. Endless celestial radiance started to bloom around him. There seemed to be divine figures standing tall. Immortals bowed their heads, and old Buddhas sat cross-legged. They were chanting scriptures to reform demons. However, when the young man opened his eyes, the celestial and Buddha figures trembled in fear and were about to shatter. A demonic intent flashed in Ling Xiao's eyes. He slowly stood up and walked out of the palace. Seventh grade exalted realm, sage realm divine soul, sovereign realm physical body. With Ling Xiao's current strength, even if he were to face a true sage, he would be able to crush him with his physical body. 100,000 years of Taoist rhymes had refined Ling Xiao's physical body to perfection. All kinds of heavenly mystery rules had evolved on their own. It was mysterious. Welcome back, Lord. However, when he stepped out of the ancient palace, a purple-clothed figure suddenly appeared in the void and stood in front of him. At this moment, Bewitching Butterfly's beautiful face was filled with unconcealed admiration. The emotions flowing in her pair of purple eyes caused Ling Xiao to feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. She had coveted him for more than 100,000 years. If he succeeded, wouldn't it be a battle to the death? Why are you not teaching your disciples in the ancestral land? What are you doing here? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. There was an indifferent smile on his face. He didn't have any feelings for this demon king. However, it was obvious that this woman's feelings for the sky demon weren't simple. Today is the day of Lord's reappearance. Many experts from various forces in the Azure continent have arrived. As the ninth ancestor of the Ling people, I naturally have to stand behind Lord and let those Orioles, cough cough, let those people with evil intentions know about the foundation of the Ling people. Bewildering Butterfly smiled. However, Ling Xiao shook his head. With a thought, his figure suddenly disappeared. After a while, he reappeared in front of Bewildering Butterfly. Bewildering Butterfly's beautiful eyes narrowed. There was a hint of shock in her eyes. Even with her strength, she was unable to detect how Ling Xiao had concealed his aura and concealed his whereabouts. As expected a master, even though he was in his youth, he was unparalleled in the world, and his divine might was vast and mighty. Let's go, Ling Xiao said indifferently as he lifted his feet and walked towards the horizon. At this moment, he could feel that there were countless powerful and ancient auras standing in the direction of the divine palace of the Ling people. Clearly, the entire Azure world was very curious about this young master of the Ling people. However, he did not know how many leaks had gathered in front of the main hall today. When the mystic Butterfly and Ling Xiao walked far away, another figure suddenly floated up into appearance before the ancient hall. Ling Xiao looked at the distant horizon with a gentle smile on his face. Then he stretched out his hand and tore through the void, shooting out of the realm of deities. Buzz, buzz. Ling people stood in front of the divine palace. The spiritual power was vast and mighty, and the heavenly rhythm was at its peak. Endless divine radiance gathered above everyone's heads, and the aura of the great Tao stretched for thousands of miles. The arrival of dozens of earthly sovereigns and saint realm experts was a grand sight that was rarely seen in the past tens of thousands of years. And these people had all come for a young man. The Taigu Ling people were extremely mysterious. The world only knew that the 9 elders of the direct bloodline had all become saints, and the clan leader, Ling Tsangming, was known as the strongest person below the heavenly sovereign level. But now, looking at the countless experts from the Ling clan's branch family standing around the square, whether it was Xue Xiyin, the young lord of the Realm Lord Hall, or Hong Guji, the master of the Daotian Academy's puppet school, both revealed a solemn expression. What was a foundation? The emergence of monstrous talents meant that the strong would not die. After tens of thousands of years of accumulation, this faction would only become more and more terrifying. But now, the Saint Realm experts in the Azure world, who were strong enough to establish a sect, stood around the main hall like guards. They did not have the right to step onto the divine platform in front of the hall. Buzz! Suddenly, the rhythm of the great Tao surged, and a celestial sound rang out. Suddenly, a surge of heavenly might pressed down from the sky, causing the expressions of the countless experts in front of the hall to change drastically. Buzz! Countless rays of spiritual light rose up, and the void suddenly bloomed with multicolored light. Just as everyone looked up at the sky in horror, they saw a white-robed figure descend from the sky. His magnificence was unparalleled, and his might suppressed all directions. Greetings, Patriarch Yuanxing. Ling Tsangming and the other Ling people's elders immediately bowed. The sound of people kneeling in unison came from all around the divine hall. Ling Yuanxing. Hearing that, everyone's eyes narrowed, but they understood in their hearts. The patriarch of the Ling people, Ling Yuanxing, was the only heavenly sovereign that the world knew of among the Ling people. With the strength of the people in front of the hall, it was impossible to see his cultivation level. But just the power just now was enough to intimidate the world. Yes, welcome to my Ling clan. Let's witness the birth of the Ling clan's young master. Ling Yuanxing's expression was indifferent, as if he was a different person in front of Ling Xiao. Wherever his gaze landed, waves of celestial aura gushed out, making people not dare to look directly at him. Elder Xing, can you feel the strength of this patriarch of the Ling people? In front of the crowd, Xue Xiyin frowned slightly, but he was shocked. It was rumored that this patriarch of the Ling people was the youngest of the Ling people. In other words, his cultivation level might also be the weakest. 5th grade heavenly sovereign. Lushing his tone was indifferent, and there was not much emotion on his face. 5th grade, Xue Xiyin nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a pair of wings suddenly spread out in the sky. In a breath's time, the sky darkened, and all light was extinguished. An incomparably domineering supreme aura descended from the sky, shaking everyone's hearts. Young lord, be careful. Lu Xinghe's eyes narrowed, and his sword intent soared into the sky. He stepped forward and blocked Xue Xiyin behind him. In the end, the only force that the Realm Lord Hall was truly afraid of in this world was the Ling people. Moreover, according to the young lord's guess, the appearance of the sky demon was probably inextricably linked to the Ling people. In this way, if the Ling people wanted to control the Azure world, they would definitely have to attack the Realm Lord Hall. Now that the Realm Lord was missing, the Ling people no longer had anything to worry about. Lu Xinghe did not want Xue Xiyin to take the risk to come to the Ling people's ancestral land because he was worried that the Ling people would attack this young lord who controlled the lifeline of the Realm Lord Hall. This spiritual aura was enough to threaten Lu Xinghe's life. It was obvious that another patriarch of the Ling people had appeared. Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the endless darkness. Then, just as a chill rose in everyone's heart and spiritual light shone brightly around them, a black-robed figure suddenly appeared in the void thousands of miles away. However, there was no spiritual aura coming from his body. As he stepped forward, green lotuses of the great Tao bloomed in the sky. There was also a trace of gentleness on that fairy-like face, which made the fear in people's hearts suddenly dissipate. It was flawless, clear, and natural. It was like a peerless fairy, and also like the boundless deep space. Heaven and earth were silent. Auspicious clouds dispersed the darkness. An immortal light shone for eternity. The elders and clansmen of the Ling people all bowed at this moment, waking up the experts of the immortal sects and ancient clans who had been stunned on the spot. "Welcome, young lord." Chapter 943. Young Master of the Ling People. In front of the temple, countless people's eyes trembled as they looked at the young man in black who was walking down from the sky. At this moment, there was a bright light shining around Ling Zhao's body from time to time. Endless phenomena alternated around his body, and there was a faint charm that was compatible with the heavenly Tao. Everyone was looking at him, and there was no difference between heaven and earth. Especially that gentle immortal face. It made the eyes of many female geniuses of the ancient sects ripple. Their mouths were slightly open, and they had the urge to cry. Even Shuexian, Wenren Jiga, and the other true monstrous geniuses of the azure sky world had a strange look in their eyes. Without the identity of the young master of the Ling people, this black-clothed young man would definitely be an outstanding person with his immortal aura. Inexplicably, some people started to look at Shuexian. Originally, they hadn't seen Ling Xiao. This young master of the Realm Lord Palace was the most handsome person in the younger generation of the Azure Sky world. But now, with the appearance of the young master of the Ling people, the two of them were evenly matched in terms of appearance and status. In this chaotic world, there were finally two main characters. In fact, some of the leaders of the forces were already secretly guessing what choice they should make between the Ling clan and the World Lord's palace. This Master Ling Xiao is too handsome, isn't he? Yes, as soon as I see the young master, I have a desire to gallop with him. Buzz! Just as everyone was thinking, another purple-robed figure appeared in the void behind Ling Xiao. His face was like a painting, and his temperament was extremely cold, especially that pair of purple eyes, which looked down on everyone in front of the temple with an aura that looked down on the world. "Greetings, Patriarch Bewitching Butterfly." This time, even Ling Yuanxing, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, bowed and kowtowed. Another patriarch of the Ling people. Even though the crowd still couldn't see through the cultivation of this patriarch of the Ling people, they inexplicably felt a chill in their hearts when they saw Ling Yuanxing's respectful expression. "Elder Xing, what is this person's cultivation level?" Shuexian's brows furrowed slightly, a grave look finally appearing in his eyes. "I can't see through him." Lu Xinghe shook his head slightly, but the young man in front of him was stunned. When even Elder Xing was unable to see through her cultivation, wouldn't it mean that the purple-gowned woman's cultivation was even more frightening than him? The Starfall Hall's Hall Master? Shuexian's eyes were clear as he looked up at the two figures descending from the sky. At this moment, there was not much surprise on his face. Ling people had lived for 100,000 years, and he had never heard of a young master being born. Now that he had made such a big fuss, it was impossible for him to be a piece of trash. However, what puzzled Shuexian was that his immortal demon, Ancient Bell, wasn't behaving in the slightest. Of course, before coming here, Shuexian had also thought that regardless of whether or not the young master of the Ling people had appeared at that time was a coincidence, the Ling people had most likely made ample preparations to conceal his identity. However, the immortal devil Ancient Bell rang 9 times. What did this mean? It meant that this young master of the Ling people might not have been in the Azure Sky world before. And now, the Ling people had announced the birth of their young master in such a high-profile manner. In Shuexian's eyes, it was just another deliberate cover-up. No matter how gentle and polite this young man was pretending to be, in Shuexian's eyes, he was an extremely dangerous person. There was even a high possibility that he was the reincarnation of the legendary sky demon. While Shuexian was sizing up Ling Xiao, the latter's gaze also finally landed on this young master of the Realm Lord Palace. In the next instant, his eyes narrowed, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became even gentler. 60,000 Providence, ninth grade Exalt Realm, already possessing sage power. There was an extremely mysterious concealment on his body. Even Ling Xiao couldn't see through his divine body Taoist rhyme at first glance. However, 60,000 Providence. For a moment, Ling Xiao really wanted to use the Providence plundering talisman and kill this young master of the Realm Lord Palace on the spot. But just as he was about to do so, he saw a sudden surge of celestial light outside Xue Xian's body. Vaguely, there seemed to be a terrifying force that could suppress the universe, smashing down with a loud bang, pressing down on Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's face turned serious. Divine runes appeared in his eyes and dispelled that overwhelming force. Only then did he smile brightly at Xue Xian. A supreme weapon? It was obvious that the force that could shock Ling Xiao was most likely released by the legendary immortal demon Ancient Bell, the only supreme weapon in the Azure Sky world. Even if Ling Xiao only used his consciousness to protect its owner, he couldn't escape the detection of this treasure. Also, Xue Xian didn't seem to have noticed anything strange about the immortal demon Ancient Bell. It seemed that the celestial opportunity that had concealed his aura was also the power of this bell. At this moment, seeing the smile on Ling Xiao's face, Xue Xian was obviously stunned. Then, he nodded gently with a natural elegance. Let's begin. The bewitching butterfly descended from the sky and landed in front of the Ling people. Ling Songming glanced at Ling Yuanxing before taking a step forward and shouting, "Today, the 19th generation young master of the Ling people, Ling Xiao, has been born. He is the only one in the 19th generation of the Ling people. Now that the world is in chaos and demons are everywhere, our young master will inherit the will of heaven and earth and the will of the immortal Tao. He will eliminate all demons and return peace to the world." Ling Songming's gaze swept across the crowd. He saw a trace of shock in the eyes of Hong Guji and the other top orthodoxies experts. The only one in the 19th generation? Although Ling Songming didn't say anything threatening at this moment, his words were enough to make all the races in the Azure Sky world fearful. The only one in the 19th generation? In other words, as long as Ling Xiao was killed, the Taigu Ling people's legacy could be said to have been cut off. However, at the same time, the Ling people would no longer have any scruples. Who in the entire Azure Sky world could withstand the wrath of the Ling people? In other words, once this ancient race's legacy was cut off, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be the beginning of the end of the world. Now that Ling Songming had made this secret public, it was a blatant threat. There is only one young master of our race. However, if anyone dares to harm him, there will be no mercy. Good. Such a young man is the hope of the immortal Tao. Now that the Sky Demon had appeared, the Azure Sky world seemed calm and peaceful, but countless ancient existences were already panicking. However, since the Sky Demon had come to the ordinary realm, it might be an opportunity for the human race. At the end of the day, it was the immortals who ruled the world, not the human race. It was the ancient gods who had destroyed the overlords of this world. It had nothing to do with the human race. Even if the Sky Demon returned, it would still be the immortals who wanted revenge. Therefore, countless geniuses from the various ancient races and immortal sects had appeared in the world in an attempt to find a fortuitous opportunity in this chaotic world. In ancient times, there was the Xianyuan who fought the heavens. Now, who knew which young man would become the human emperor who would revive the human race? Cheers rose and fell in front of the main hall. Even Xue Xian clapped his hands lightly, as if he was convinced by the righteousness of the Ling people. However, the more the Ling people acted like this, the more uneasy he felt. According to Ling Songming, the Ling people still didn't plan to conquer the world. Instead, they just sent this Ling people's young master to fight for the world providence? What exactly was this ancient faction plotting? Chapter 944. Ling people have always been known for their benevolence, righteousness, and fairness. Although the position of young master is expected, there are still many branches who have a chance to fight for it. In front of the temple, Ling Yuanxing suddenly spoke, causing the expressions of many Ling people powerhouses to change. Especially those elders from the branch families, their eyes flickered with a wisp of shock and surprise. According to the 13th ancestor, the position of young master of the Ling people had not been decided yet. Although Ling Xiao was indeed talented, he was still young. The position of young master of the Taigu Ling people was as prestigious as the young master of the World Lord Palace. If a branch descendant could obtain this position, it would be a great fortune for the entire branch. Unknowingly, many of the branch elders' eyes were filled with anticipation. At the same time, many of the spectating powerhouses were also stunned. What did the patriarch of the Ling people mean? Could it be that he wanted to have a fair competition where the winner could obtain the position of young master? Weren't you afraid that a child of destiny from the branch family would come and humiliate the direct descendants? Ling people's branch family members under the age of 500 can challenge anyone. If anyone can defeat Ling Xiao, he will be the young master of the Ling people and enjoy the same honor as the direct descendants, Ling Yuanxing said calmly. Ling Yuanxing said indifferently. He wasn't doing this to make things difficult for Ling Xiao. However, with the strength and status of the direct descendants of the Ling people, if he did not make a promise, the branch descendants would not dare to challenge Ling Xiao's authority, even if they were given 100 guts. Ling Xiao had just ascended to the upper realm. Although he had the Ling people's background, he had not yet won a famous battle. If he wanted everyone in the Azure Realm to know of his prowess as the young master of the Ling people, then he would have to be given a chance to become famous in one battle. Then, even if Ling Xiao traveled to other regions in the future, no one would dare to look down on him. The branch descendants of the Ling people looked at each other. In the Azure Realm, 1,000 years was a generation, and 10,000 years was a generation. However, no matter how one looked at it, Ling Xiao's age was less than 100 years old. At most, he was in his early 20s. Could it be that the ancestor really intended to give the position of young master to the collateral branch? You only have one chance. After today, whoever dares to question the authority of the Ling people will have their entire family wiped out. Ling Yuanxing's voice was cold and indifferent, containing an unquestionable dominance. Finally, someone from the branch family of the Ling people stepped forward and stood in front of Ling Xiao. I'll do it. It's Ling Fan. Many of the Ling people's collateral family members were delighted, and the countless spectators were filled with anticipation. On one hand, they were extremely curious about Ling Xiao's background. This young master of the Ling people seemed to have appeared out of thin air in the Azure Sky world and was relied upon by the Taigu Ling people. On the other hand, Ling people were mysterious and known to all, and this young master who had suddenly appeared might be the key to uncovering the secrets of Ling people. As for his strength, whether it was the almighty of the sex or the monsters of the Azure Sky world, of course, they all wanted to see it with their own eyes. Ling Fan was the most talented member of the Ling people's collateral family in the past 500 years. He had stepped into the exalted realm at the age of 270 and had become a legend of the Ling people. He was even known by the Azure Sky world. In fact, among the people present, there were a few young masters of large clans and descendants of ancient sects who had fought with him before, but none of them had won. Among them, there was no lack of people with divine bodies who had comprehended the laws of Tao. Master Ling Xiao, Ling Fan boldly wishes to spar with you. Ling Fan's face was resolute, and there seemed to be a divine glow around him. His aura was extremely stable and long. With his second-rank exalted realm cultivation, he could be called a monster in the entire Azure Sky world. Although Ling Xiao's status was noble, in Ling Fan's eyes, he was too young and might not be a match for him. You're no match for me. Ling Xiao shook his head and glanced at the Ling people. He saw that there was no one among the Ling people who had the mandate of heaven. No wonder they were set as villains. However, Among the spectators, there were a few people who had the mandate of heaven and earth. It looked very interesting. In particular, there were a few young and beautiful women with rosy cheeks and watery eyes. They were most likely good people who had good karma. Young master, Ling Fan gritted his teeth. If Ling Zhao's status was not so noble, he would have scolded him. But what can I do? I just mocked him, and the elders and ancestors will accuse me of being disrespectful and kill me. Do I have to? Let's go together. Who else wants to challenge the position of young master? Ling Zhao's expression was indifferent. However, the words he spoke were filled with an extreme, tyrannical air. Since there was no mandate of heaven, who among the branches of the Ling people could be his opponent? Moreover, Ling Xiao had merged with the spiritual aura of heaven and earth that the Ling people had accumulated for 100,000 years. With his current combat strength, even if he did not use the true form of the sky demon, he could fight against the saint. If he wanted to kill a bunch of exalted realm and divine emperors, he could kill them with one slash. What? Hearing this, not only the branches of the Ling people, but also Ling Yuanxing and the others were stunned. Only Mi Dai's eyes were shining, and there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. This was the master in her heart, the one who had been domineering since the beginning of time. In front of him, the so-called immortals and gods were just fish on the chopping block. He could kill them with a wave of his hand. Of course, if anyone dared to hurt her master, even if it was just a strand of hair, she would kill 10 generations of their family. My master is precious. How can you mortals hurt him? Young master, come, I don't want to waste time. Ling Xiao put his hands behind his back and looked at the sky in the distance. At this moment, he could feel that there seemed to be several auras rushing towards him. In particular, there was a familiar cold wave of energy that made his face warm. The Foliaceae had arrived. He had asked Yi Qinchan to personally deliver the Foliaceae's immortal treasure. Without his order, Yi Yin and the others would not have dared to come to the divinity battlefield. However, early this morning, Ling Xiao suddenly ordered all the Foliaceae's ancestors who were not direct descendants of the Foliaceae to come to the Ling people for an audience. That was why they were late. Otherwise, with the current strength of the Foliaceae, how could they be so lazy and dare to come late to congratulate the young master of the Ling people on his birth? Young master, sorry. In front of the main hall, a dozen prodigies from the branch families walked up to Ling Xiao one after another. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with a strong desire to fight. It was obvious that although they did not dare to be dissatisfied with Ling Zhao's arrogance, they were still angry in their hearts. And these people were all full of Taoist rhymes and spiritual power. Although they did not have providence, they were all worthy of respect in other orthodoxies. Is there anyone else? Ling Zhao's eyes were calm. The moment he finished speaking, he heard a cold shout from the sky. Yi Qinchan of the Foliaceae greets the young master. Countless ancient sect cultivators frowned slightly and looked up at the green-robed figure descending from the sky. Their eyes flashed with surprise. The Foliaceae was the only force that dared to come late on the birth of the Ling people's young master. But at this moment, when they saw the peerlessly beautiful young lady in green, many people's faces showed a look of realization. 7 days ago, the young master of the Ling people was angry and killed his way to the Heavenly Wood region for the sake of the Foliaceae's beauty. He killed saints and heavenly venerables. His birth was the focus of everyone's attention. Originally, everyone was still wondering what kind of woman could make the young master of the ancient clan so impulsive and impudent. Now, after seeing Yi Qinchan, they finally understood. What a beautiful fairy-like woman. In particular, the wisp of invisible coldness surrounding this young lady seemed to freeze the world. Not only did it not make people feel alienated, but it also made people want to get close to her and warm her. What kind of coldness could make such a beautiful young lady understand the most bone-chilling coldness in the world? Chapter 945. Qinchan, There's no need for us to be so courteous." Ling Zhao's expression was gentle, giving people the impression that he was a young master who was as pure as jade. Logically speaking, the identity of the Taigu Ling people was enough for Ling Xiao to look down on this world and be arrogant and tyrannical. In fact, the words he said 7 days ago when he challenged all the prodigies from the branch families were still extremely domineering. However, under that domineering aura, there was also a kind of warmth that was difficult to conceal. "Lord Ling Xiao, exactly what kind of person are you?" At this moment, many prodigies from the ancient sects and young ladies from the great clans were curious. Originally, they thought that they would be able to uncover Ling Zhao's secrets after witnessing the ceremony today. At the very least, they would be able to learn about his character and preferences. However, inexplicably at this moment, the crowd felt even more confused. Of course, no matter what his character was, if they could have a relationship with him, it would be a supreme fortune for the women of this world and the forces behind them. What's more, what morals? Young Master Ling Xiao has such a beautiful face. How could he have any bad intentions? Young Master. Yi Qingchuan pursed her lips and smiled lightly. There was a mischievous look on her face that did not match her temperament. The crowd's expression turned cold. They inexplicably felt that the two people in front of the shrine were a perfect match. With Yi Qingchuan's celestial appearance, perhaps only that person from the Gu clan or the Immortal Phoenix clan could compare to her. Humph! The bewitching butterfly's beautiful eyes were sinister as she coldly looked at Yi Qingchuan. There seemed to be an invisible force descending from the sky. It was obvious that she was deliberately intimidating her. However, to the bewitching butterfly's surprise, Yi Qingchuan clearly felt her hostility. However, there was not the slightest trace of panic or fear on her face. She was as calm as ever. It was as if a heavenly exalted ancestor of the Taigu Ling people was not intimidating at all in her eyes. How is this possible? A mere god emperor dared to act rashly? If it wasn't for the fact that it was afraid of Ling Xiao, the mystic butterfly would have already taken action and killed this demoness who had bewitched its master. Yi Qingchuan raised her head and calmly glanced at the bewitching butterfly. Then, she stretched out her jade-like hand and removed the white jade sword box from her shoulder. She handed it over to Ling Xiao with both hands. "Young Master, this is the immortal treasure of the Foliaceae family, great sage Futian. Today, I present it to Young Master to congratulate Young Master on your birth." "What? It's actually the ancient Futian sword." The entire square instantly fell into a dead silence, followed by bursts of undisguised exclamations. Many people's eyes revealed a wisp of disbelief. Great Saint Futian was a famous saint-grade immortal sword in the Azure Sky realm. It was rumored that this sword belonged to the Immortal Clan and had the power to slay demons. Furthermore, in the ranking of the ancient Azure swords, this sword was ranked at the top, and it suppressed the 7 famous swords of the Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb. Such a sacred object was already the foundation of a sect. Even the powerful Taigu Ling people did not have a supreme weapon. A Saint Great Spirit treasure was a supreme treasure in the Azure Sky realm. Although the Foliaceae family was not strong, they were still a vassal of the Immortal Clan. This great Saint Futian was the symbol of their clan and the proof of their status as immortals. But now, Yi Qingchuan had come with this sword to congratulate Ling Xiao on his birth. Xue Xian frowned slightly, and her beautiful eyes contained a hint of coldness. Before this, the Foliaceae family had always had a close relationship with the Realm Lord Palace. In the eyes of outsiders, the Foliaceae family was the Realm Lord's alliance. But today, Yi Qingchuan dared to take the initiative to present the family's heirloom treasure in front of him. This was tantamount to slapping the Realm Lord Palace's face. What are the Foliaceae planning? Their ancestor was killed, and they actually took the initiative to present a treasure and surrender? The Foliaceae family is indeed a vassal of the Immortal Clan. They have a servile nature in their bones. Look at Yi Qingchuan's peerless beauty. I didn't expect her to have such a nature. Is she impatient to get on Master Ling Zhao's bed? Maybe it's already morning? If you have the chance to get on Lord Ling Zhao's bed, will you do it? If I were a man, I'd do it. I advise you, if you want to humiliate Yi Qing-shan, then humiliate Yi Qing-shan. It's best if you don't bring Master Ling Xiao along. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died later. Be careful with your words. Instantly, there were waves of discussion and exclamations in the square. The gazes of many experts from the ancient sects wandered between the green-robed figure and Ling Xiao. It had to be said that the sight of two people side by side was a visual pleasure for anyone. Immortal couples were nothing more than this. But in terms of status, Yi Qing-shan was far from being worthy of this young master of the Ling people. Of course, in terms of status, only Xue Shiyin, the young master of the Realm Lord Palace, dared to say that Ling Xiao was a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, he was a man. Great Saint Fu Tian, what a good name. Ling Xiao's eyes were clear as he reached out to take the sword box. He felt a wisp of extremely cold sword intent move along his arm, as if it wanted to break free. You don't know what's good for you. Ling Xiao snorted coldly. Suddenly, a sword intent rushed into the sky outside his body. Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden sword cry that spread for 30,000 miles. Layers of sword chi and clear light tore through the sky, shocking the 9 heavens. The entire sky above the deity battle domain suddenly shattered like ice crystals. Heaven and earth reversed, and heaven and earth changed. At this moment, many experts who used the sword felt their bodies and minds tremble. Even the swords on their bodies seemed to have the momentum to fly away with the wind. How is this possible? This young master of the Ling people is actually a monstrous swordsman? This sword intent, I'm afraid that even the successor of the Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb can't be better than this, right? As expected of the Taigu Ling people. Speaking of which, this clan has a sword immortal who hasn't appeared in the world for a long time, right? You mean white-robed immortal? That's right. I wonder if Master Ling Xiao has anything to do with this person? Many people's eyes trembled, as if they had thought of something terrifying. Their gazes towards Ling Xiao became more and more respectful and fearful. Crack! The coldness on Ling Xiao's face only quietly disappeared when a crack suddenly appeared on the 3-foot sword box. Then he suddenly clenched his fist, and the jade box that contained the ancient sword instantly turned into powder. A rusty, ancient bronze sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The ancient sword was 3 feet long, and there seemed to be cloud patterns lingering around the sword. Other than that, there was no trace of carvings. It was simple and mysterious. It was rumored that this sword was the sword of a supreme expert of the immortal clan. It was also the divine sword of the immortal king who submitted to the Foliaceae. During the battle of the immortal ancient era, the 18 ancestors of the Foliaceae were all killed in battle. The immortal clan praised the loyalty of the Foliaceae and gave this sword to its master, Yi Luoyun. However, although this sword was a sacred artifact, it contained a domineering aura of the immortal clan. It refused to submit to the common people and was even more unwilling to be an item in the hands of a mortal. Therefore, the world only knew that the Foliaceae had a sacred artifact, Futian. However, they had never seen anyone from the Foliaceae carrying this sword. Ling Xiao held the sword with one hand and glanced at the tip of the sword. A hint of admiration flashed in the depths of his eyes. The will in the sword just now was enough to make a supreme being expert panic. Unfortunately, he had already perfected his sword Dao and had a divine item like the absolute beginning divine talisman. Therefore, the moment this sword will disturb his soul, Ling Xiao completely suppressed it with the power of the divine talisman. Now that he had just stepped into the Azure world, he could not use the reincarnation demonic blade casually. This sacred artifact was worthy of him to hold. Looking at the tall figure of the young man in black holding the sword with one hand, many members of the Foliaceae had complicated expressions. To be able to make the Futian immortal sword submit, could this young man really be blessed by the heavens? Chapter 946. Good sword. Ling Xiao put his hand behind his back and placed the Fujian ancient sword behind his back, looking carefree. He stood in front of the palace, his black robe fluttering, as if an immortal emperor had descended and looked down on the mortals. Congratulations on being recognized by the immortal sword. I hope that you will be invincible in the future. Yi Qingchan's voice was sharp and piercing through the 9 heavens. At this moment, both the Supremes and the ordinary disciples felt a chill run down their spines. Unknowingly, everyone's hair stood on end, especially the graceful figure in the green robe in front of the palace. At this moment, she was like a sword, emitting a piercing coldness that made people not dare to look at her directly. Qingchan, you can leave now. Ling Xiao smiled gently, his temperament transcendent. Yes, young master. Yi Qingchan smiled gently, then turned and walked into the crowd. However, at this moment, her gaze swept past Xue Xian lightly. Their eyes met, and a sudden chill filled the air. Yi Qingchan frowned slightly. She was sure that this was the first time she had seen the young master of the Realm Lord Palace. However, for some reason, she felt a kind of familiar aura from her. Yi Qingchan, Xue Xian raised her eyebrows slightly, and a mysterious smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. 300 years ago, you were sent to the lower realm by the Foliaceae. I heard that you only returned to the Azure continent 7 days ago. What does it have to do with you? Yi Qingchan's tone was cold, and she did not have any concerns because of Xue Xian's identity. Behind her, Yi Yin and the other fully patriarchs and elders were pale, and cold sweat dripped from their heads. Although they had now joined the Taigu Ling people, the Realm Lord Palace was still like a tall mountain that pressed down on their heads. On the day you returned to the Azure continent, the immortal demon Ancient Bell rang 9 times. If you had not appeared in the Azure continent before, I would have thought that you were the Sky Demon. Although Xue Xian was smiling, the coldness in her eyes was not concealed at all. Was it just a coincidence? Or did Yi Qingchan have an identity that she did not know? For example, was she an accomplice of the Sky Demon? Young Lord, you must be joking. If you didn't open your mouth, I would have thought that you were a woman. Yi Qingchan suddenly smiled. She turned around and walked to the side, no longer looking at Xue Xian. Interesting. Xue Xian raised his eyebrows slightly, but in front of the temple, Ling Xiao suddenly said in a deep voice, "If you can take a sword strike from me, I'll give up the position of young master." Hearing this, the eyes of the Ling people's collateral descendants suddenly narrowed. Suddenly, a few of them quietly retreated and disappeared into the crowd. The great Saint Fujian, even if it was in the hands of an idiot, was still a top-notch saint tool. What was a saint artifact? Other than the supreme weapon in the Realm Lord's palace, the great sage Fujian could be said to be the most powerful spiritual treasure in this realm. Needless to say, was Master Ling Xiao an idiot? Back then, the reason why the Azure Realm Lord was unrivaled under the heavens was precisely because he had the immortal devil Ancient Bell in his hand. But today he slipped away. Are you ready? Ling Xiao turned around and looked at the crowd. Suddenly, he put away the ancient sword in his hand and calmly extended 2 fingers. Seeing this, the young Ling people who had originally retreated quietly moved back, wanting to return to the crowd. But at this moment, Ling Xiao suddenly extended his fingers and gently slashed at the dozen or so prodigies from the collateral branches. Buzz! Suddenly, the sound of a sword resonated between heaven and earth. Everyone only saw a ray of sword light tearing through the sky, as if the Milky Way was falling from the sky and thousands of stars were falling from the sky. Wherever the river of stars passed, celestial light dazzled and dazzled. Countless strange phenomena appeared one after another. The blue sky collapsed as if it couldn't withstand this sword force at all. Thousands of miles of tribulation lightning covered all directions, as if the end of the world was coming. The prodigies from the collateral branches of the Ling people opened their mouths slightly and looked up at the ray of sword light that could destroy the world. For a moment, they were stunned. It was not until Ling Fan shouted that the crowd recovered from their shock. Countless spiritual treasures rose up covering the sky and bringing with him supreme divine power to meet the sword light. However, Ling Xiao now had the power to kill a martial sage. The young Ling people in front of him were at most 5th-level martial exalted realm. How could they be a match for him? The moment the spiritual lights came into contact with the river of swords, they were instantly annihilated and dissipated. At this moment, Ling Fan and the others finally saw fear in their eyes. What a terrifying sword intent! In front of the temple, the eyes of countless experts trembled. Even Xue Xian was shocked. Although, with his strength, it would not be too difficult for him to withstand this sword intent. How could he not see that Ling Xiao was not using his full strength at all? In fact, if he held the great Saint Fu Tian at this moment, just this sword alone would be enough to be called invincible in the martial exalted realm. Clang, 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 clang at this moment. On the square, the ear-piercing sound of a bell suddenly resounded in all directions, instantly waking up the dazed crowd. Everyone was surprised. They turned to look at the golden bell that had uncontrollably manifested above Xue Xian's head. Indescribable fear surged in their eyes. At this moment, a golden bell that was 100 feet long floated quietly in the sky. The bell was illusory, and there seemed to be thousands of Dao inscriptions flickering. The originally gloomy sky was suddenly pierced by a flash of golden light, shocking the 9 heavens. Just the bell shadow alone was enough to overturn the world. Even martial sages, such as Mystic Butterfly and Ling Yuanxing, felt an inexplicable pressure envelop the world. The sky demon has appeared. Xue Xian stood where he was in a daze. He looked up at the ancient bell shadow, unable to react for a moment. At first, he had a feeling that this young master of the Ling people's identity was inseparable from the sky demon. But now, what was going on? Could it be that he was wrong? It's in the east. Xue Xian stepped out and stood on the ancient bell of the immortal demon. Her beautiful eyes narrowed as she looked at the demonic light in the distant sky. Buzz! At this moment, the sword-light galaxy that was about to fall suddenly stopped 3 feet above Ling Fan and the others' heads and disappeared without a trace. Ling Zhao's figure rose into the sky and stood side by side with Xue Xian. There was a rare trace of seriousness between his brows. The aura of the sky demon? Hearing this, Xue Xian turned to look at the young man beside him and nodded slightly. The sky demon is feared by the 9 heavens. This is no small matter. Young Master Xue, there's no time to lose. Let's go together. Ling Zhao's voice was low. At this moment, there was no trace of panic on his face. Instead, there was a strong fighting spirit. Okay. Xue Xian's eyes trembled slightly. In the end, he didn't hesitate and rushed toward the place where the demonic light was falling. Behind him, Lu Xing's figure suddenly disappeared, and Mystic Butterfly also stepped into the sky and stood behind Ling Xiao. Although this former subordinate of the sky demon had some doubts in her eyes, when she saw the faint smile on Ling Zhao's face, Mystic Butterfly suddenly understood. No wonder Ling Xiao was so ostentatious when he came to the upper realm that day. It turned out that he had already thought of a way to escape today. After all, the ancient bell of the immortal demon had sounded 9 times in a row in front of everyone's eyes, and Ling Xiao was right in front of everyone. All suspicions were naturally dispelled. Chapter 9:47. Everyone, the sky demon is a matter of great importance. Why don't we investigate it together? Ling Xiao stood tall in the void as he looked down at the people from the various orthodoxies and shouted in a deep voice. Since Master Ling Xiao is willing to take the lead, we will not be cowards. Master, you are a righteous man. Countless young sky prides in the crowd shouted in agreement. After all, the successors of the 2 top forces in the Azure world were present. Even if the sky demon was reborn, it would not be as powerful as it was in the past. Otherwise, why would he hide his tracks and act in such a low-key manner? Let's go. Ling Xiao stepped out, his body turning into a graceful swan as he chased after the snow-tide rock. Ling Fan and the others only stumbled and fell to the ground after the crowd had left. Their backs were already drenched in cold sweat. If it wasn't for the immortal devil ancient bell ringing earlier, they would have been killed by the sword radiance. Even the elders from the collateral families had complicated looks in their eyes. As expected, the people from the direct line were all monsters. Now that the world was in chaos, Master Ling Xiao, with his sword immortal talent, would become the true protagonist of this era. Buzz, Heavenly Wood region, ancestral land of the Foliaceae. At this moment, Ling Xiao was in an ancient palace at the peak of the mountain. He was dressed in black and surrounded by a demonic radiance. At his feet, there were countless corpses, all dressed in white robes, lying on the ground in disarray. However, the strange thing was that the corpses had long lost their vitality, but there was no smell of blood in the palace. In the middle of the ancient palace, 2 jade white stone coffins were placed quietly. Yi Shanhe, the master of the Foliaceae and the heavenly supreme patriarch of the Foliaceae, were placed in the coffins. Now, the people from the Foliaceae guarding the coffins in the palace were all from the direct line. This saved Ling Xiao a lot of trouble. Master, Ghost Shadow, Mount Ray, Urian, and the others appeared from the void and bowed to Ling Xiao. The direct descendants of the Foliaceae are all here. Yes, Ling Xiao gently nodded. The moment he knew about the immortal demon Ancient Bell, he had already thought of a way to get rid of suspicion. Moreover, when the patriarch of the Foliaceae died, just a drop of his blood contained enough power to destroy the world. To Ling Xiao, his body could be considered a supreme treasure. Of course, the Ghost Clan's classic, the Yama Sutra, was a divine soul art that could be used to control the undead zombies. However, this physical body had lost its soul and contained the might of the heavens. If it could be refined into a puppet, why do you think the Daotian Academy sent the master of the puppet school and the most talented disciple? Of course, it was the Ling clan who invited Hongguji and Wenren Jiga. Master, according to your instructions, we have erased all traces of our auras. Ghost Shadow's voice was hoarse. Now, the strongest direct descendant of the Foliaceae was only a second-grade saint. For Ghost Shadow and the others, they could kill him with a wave of their hand. However, if someone sensed the aura of this 8th-grade earthly sovereign, they would definitely think that the Sky Demon had matured and would be on guard. What Ling Xiao had to do was to pretend that the Sky Demon was weak and that all the geniuses of the various clans could fight him to increase their courage to kill him. That demonic will that soared into the sky was the heavenly demon's helpless action. Look, I did kill a saint, but I also exposed my trump card. This way, Ling Xiao would have more opportunities to reap the benefits of the heavens in the dark. Therefore, the Ling people's previous actions were not meticulous enough. Although the Ling people's experts had slaughtered Guanhai City and attracted the attention of countless people in the Azure Sky world, Ling Xiao's future actions were greatly shackled. If all the geniuses of the various clans went out to train with a paragon protecting them, how could he conquer their world? Yes, Ling Xiao waved his hand and put the bodies of the patriarch of the Foliaceae and Yi Shanhe into the interspatial ring. He looked up at the sky in the distance. The demonic aura spread out and guided everyone in a direction. Otherwise, if he deliberately hid his whereabouts, even if the immortal demon Ancient Bell could detect the Sky Demon's aura, it would not be able to find his location. Next was the first good show he had prepared for the ancient celestial sects in the Azure Sky world. The entire Divine Mountain was quiet and peaceful. Many disciples of the Foliaceae walked in the mountains, laughing and playing. They did not notice the figure standing in front of the ancient palace at the peak of the mountain with his hands behind his back. They did not even see the demonic aura hidden in the sky. With Ghost Shadow's strength, he could come and go as he pleased in the Foliaceae. Moreover, no one would have thought that someone would dare to kill in the ancestral hall of the Foliaceae. Now that the direct descendants of the Foliaceae were all dead, Yi Qing-chan should be able to secure the position of the young master with her talent. This way, the clan would be completely under Ling Xiao's control. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone without any effort. Buzz! Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the sky in the distance. Then people could be seen flying over from the sky. Ling Xiao smiled gently and turned to walk into the distance. Whoosh whoosh. The moment he disappeared, Xue Xian, Ling Xiao's Taoist body, and a group of ancient sect elites descended from the sky and landed directly on the peak of the divine mountain of the foliage. Of course, in the past, even if the foliaceae had declined, no one would dare to be so reckless. But now, with the support of young Master Xue and young Master Ling, who would dare to be impudent in front of them? What a strong demonic aura! Xue Xian frowned slightly and looked up at the ancient hall in front of him. Meanwhile, the foliaceae patriarchs looked gloomy and fearful. Why did the sky demon come to their foliaceae's ancestral land all of a sudden? Moreover, there was no trace of blood in the mountain. If no foliaceae died today, didn't that mean that the sky demon and the foliaceae were in cahoots? Hiss, hiss, hiss. Only Yi Qingchan stood quietly behind Ling Xiao. She was dressed in a green robe and looked indifferent. In this world, there was only one sky demon, and that was the young master in front of her. And, judging from the young master's expression, all of this was probably arranged by him. Let's go. Let's go in and take a look. Ling Xiao took the lead and walked toward the hall in front of him. Behind him, the ancient race prodigies looked at each other and finally gritted their teeth and followed closely behind. The sky demon was a taboo in the 9 heavens. It could be said that except for Ling Xiao, Yi Qingchan, and the Ling people's powerful cultivators, even Xue Xian had a serious look on his face. What else can I say? Lord Ling Xiao is super brave. Boom! Ling Xiao kicked open the stone door of the ancient hall. A wisp of demonic aura circulated and dissipated, but the faces of the ancient race prodigies suddenly turned pale. Inside the ancient hall, corpses were everywhere, but there was no trace of blood. Such a method could be called evil, and it was in line with the way demons did things. Phew! But seeing this, the foliaceae patriarchs all heaved a sigh of relief. Young master, are you sure that the sky demon's aura is here? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at the corpses on the ground. He sighed softly, as expected of the sky demon. His methods are indeed evil. I can't be wrong. Xue Xian's tone was indifferent. He walked in front of the jade coffin in the hall. He took away the corpses in the coffin. This doesn't seem to make sense. Ling Xiao shook his head and turned to look at Yi Yin and the others behind him. Who is in this ancient hall? Chapter 948. Master Ling Xiao, this is the ancestral hall of the foliaceae. We worship the ancestors of the foliaceae. A few days ago, you killed our clan leader and ancestors. Their lineage has been keeping vigil in this hall. Yi Yin bowed and replied with a trembling voice. His heart was already in his throat. Whether it was the Realm Lord's hall or the Taigu Ling people, if they believed that the sky demon had something to do with the foliaceae, this vassal of the immortal clan would be completely annihilated. How tragic. Back in the day, the 18 ancestors of the foliaceae were all amazing talents. They had followed the immortal clan across the world and dominated billions of galaxies. Originally, all the members of the foliaceae had thought that once the immortal clan unified the 9 heavens, the foliaceae would skyrocket and establish a foundation for eternity. Who would have thought that all 18 ancestors would die in battle? Even ancestor Yi Luoyun would willingly descend to the lower realm to guard the desolate wilderness? The vassal of the immortal clan had fallen to such a state. Indeed, those who were not of the immortal clan had different intentions. Even if the foliaceae were loyal to the heavens, they were still worthless in the eyes of the immortal clan. Oh, or rather, since all 18 ancestors of the foliaceae had died in battle, this clan had completely lost its value. In the end, strength was the foundation of all interests. What's the strongest cultivation in this group? Ling Xiao's expression was calm. However, Xue Xian seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Second stage, Sage Realm. Second stage, Sage Realm. Ling Zhao's eyes flickered with a wisp of coldness. If I remember correctly, 7 days ago, the heavenly demon appeared and annihilated several supreme beings in Seagate City. Today, it actually exposed its whereabouts when dealing with a saint stage cultivator. Is this reasonable? Many prodigies from the ancient sects and clans had a change of expression when they heard this. Even Hong Guji and the other sage stage experts had a puzzled expression on their faces. Master Ling Xiao was right. If the sky demon really had the strength to kill a great master, then wouldn't he be able to kill a second-grade Saint Realm expert with a wave of his hand? Why would he reveal such a demonic intent? Could it be a trap? Did that demon lure us here on purpose? The Grand Elder of the profound Hong celestial sect furrowed his brows as divine radiance shone from his body. Did he deliberately lure us here to see his masterpiece? Ling Zhao's cold eyes caused the immortal sect elder's face to turn red, and he could only awkwardly smile. What do you think, young Master Ling? Shuexian turned his head and stared intently at Ling Xiao, as if he wanted to find some weakness in him. The corpse of a heavenly sovereign is a supreme fortune for any demon, so he had no choice but to come. It's just that his strength might not be as terrifying as the world thinks. Ling Zhao's indifferent words caused the confusion on the faces of many experts from the various clans to deepen. Young Master Ling, do you mean the one who destroyed Seagate City back then was not the Sky Demon? Shuexian was the only one who understood the deeper meaning in Ling Zhao's words. That's right. Ling people sent experts to investigate that day, but they found that the demonic intent was more like a manifestation of a cultivation technique. If the Sky Demon has really grown to such a level, why would he hide his tracks? Ling Xiao nodded slightly, his eyes meeting Shuexian's. Someone wants to use the Sky Demon to create chaos. Everyone's expression changed, but surprisingly, no one objected. After all, this idea was not just a common one, but all the clans and forces with a strong foundation were waiting for the arrival of chaos. Only then could the human race break free from the control of the immortal clan and regain control of the world. Oh, so what do you think we should do now, young Master Ling? Shuexian's eyes were calm, and she did not show a trace of surprise at Ling Zhao's words. Of course, this is just my guess. After all, the Sky Demon's appearance is the beginning of chaos. I'm afraid no one wants to see this demon take control of the world. The physical body of a heavenly sovereign is very important. Why don't we focus on the Folly ACE and search for traces of the Sky Demon? Maybe we can find some clues. Ling Xiao turned to look at the group of experts behind him, his eyes lingering on Hong Guji and Wenren Zhiga. Young Master Ling Xiao is right. Regardless of whether that devil is alone or not, since we've encountered him, we can't just sit by and do nothing. The Xianhong Celestial Sect is willing to listen to the young master's orders. The Folly ACE is willing to listen to the young master's orders. The Sky Tyrant City is willing to listen to the young master's orders. The Daotian Academy is willing to fight with the young master. Okay, since that's the case, follow my instructions and search 100,000 miles. If you find anything, you can provide support at any time. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently and did not look at Shuexian again. Using the Folly ACE as the center, he pointed out a direction for each force, while he followed Hong Guji and Wenren Zhiga to the east. When everyone disappeared and only Shuexian and Lu Xinghe were left in the ancient palace, the young master of the World Lord Palace's face flashed with a hint of seriousness. Elder Xing, do you think it's a coincidence? Young master, you mean? Lu Xinghe frowned, obviously not understanding what Shuexian meant. The Ling people killed the patriarch of the Folly ACE. Today, this heavenly sovereign's body was taken away by the Sky Demon. Shuexian looked up and looked in the direction where Ling Xiao had disappeared. Although Ling Xiao was indeed in the clan today, and there was no chance for him to go to the Folly ACE to kill and shift the blame, but there was a hint of a conspiracy. It can't be right. Young master, I think this Ling Zhao's immortal aura does not have a trace of demonic nature. Today, he has been right under our noses and did not leave at all. Elder Xing wanted to say something, but stopped. Or do you think that the demon is someone else, but it must be related to the Ling people? It's not someone else. Xue Xian shook his head slightly. He did not know why, but from the first time he saw Ling Xiao, he felt a little uneasy. However, Xue Xian did not know whether this uneasiness was because of his almost monstrous talent in the way of the sword, or because there was another side hidden under his gentle appearance. However, if the sky demon was really from the Ling people, then he must be Ling Xiao. This was a kind of intuition. Forget it. Let's do as he said and find traces of the sky demon first. In the end, Xue Xian sighed softly and chased in the direction where Ling Xiao had left. Suddenly, the entire heavenlywood region was filled with thousands of streaks of light. Ling Xiao stepped into the void and looked at the two figures at the end of his line of sight. He seemed to be in deep thought. With his current strength, it was not a problem to kill Wenren Jiga. However, Hong Guji was known to be invincible in the Tao of puppets. It would be difficult to kill him silently in front of so many people. Xue Xian was here, and it was very likely that he would choose the same direction as him. At that time, he would definitely sense something. Moreover, Lu Xinghe, a heavenly supreme, was standing beside him. Therefore, Ling Xiao had to think of a way to lure him away or delay him. Lord, you want to kill Hong Guji? Bewitching butterfly's figure appeared from the void and stood behind Ling Xiao. Yes, Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, but bewitching butterfly's face bloomed with a sweet smile. That's easy. Give me a breath's time. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.